Chapter 482, The Fearsome Illusion Formation. The books in the Formation Master Guild were significantly fewer than that of the Appraiser Hall. Almost 70% of the books were for 2-star Formation Masters and below. Having completely comprehended that level, there was no need for Zhang Xian to go through those books once more. As such, it didn't take him long to collect the books. In just 2 hours, he already had all of them duplicated in the Library of Heaven's Path. With this collection, he had sufficient books to form Heaven's Path Formation Art 3 Dan and 4 Dan. Another 2 hours passed, and he finally managed to master them. Rubbing his glabella wearily, he exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. Having collected so many books and cultivated 2 Dan of the Heaven's Path Formation Art, even though his cultivation had already reached half transcension, he still felt slightly faint-headed and his face was ghastly pale. But still, his hard work had brought him great benefits. In terms of knowledge on formation, he still might not be a match for guild leader Jing, but in terms of setting up formations, the latter was definitely far from a match for him. More importantly. So, this is what inscribing a formation plate means. Inscribing a spirit-gathering formation sure isn't easy. With a deep understanding of formation plates, Zhang Xian finally understood why guild leader Jing flew into a rage when he told him to finish it within 2 hours. Crafting a formation plate was equivalent to carving a massive formation onto a place the size of a palm. Furthermore, it had to be aligned with the environment. As such, the difficulty of the matter was extremely great. This was especially so for spirit-gathering formations. The timing of half a month that the other party gave was actually truly the fastest speed possible already. It's true that using ordinary means to inscribe a formation plate will be difficult. However, if I were to use the Heaven's Path Formation Art to do so, it would be much easier. Ordinary formations had to follow the blueprint strictly and ensure that the layout was aligned with the environment, thus making the process incredibly complex and troublesome. A single wrong mark could potentially result in the formation being ruined. On the other hand, the Heaven's Path Formation Art emphasized on continuity and smooth flow instead. There was more flexibility in it. Thus, using the Heaven's Path Formation Art to inscribe the same blueprint would be many times simpler than using ordinary means. The preparation of the Sea of Formations should be ready by now. I should go over and take a look. Shaking his head, Zhang Xian decided to put aside the matter regarding the formation plate for the moment, and walked out of the library. Now that he had assimilated the books within the library, his understanding of formations had deepened. It was time for him to try out the Sea of Formations and become an official formation master. The Sea of Formations is just a name. Rather than an actual sea, it's just a long corridor. It is located at the 3rd floor of the Formation Master Guild, and countless formations are set up in the area. As long as one walks into the area, one will be at risk of being confined, beguiled, and even dying. That is because there are all kinds of formation in there, and that includes slaughter formations as well. But there's no need for you to worry. Every single examinee will be given a formation amulet. When you meet with true danger, you just have to crush it and the formation will immediately come to a halt. At the long corridor of the Sea of Formations, a young man gestured to the surroundings as he explained the entire proceedings to his 2 juniors. The 3 of them had come from the same teacher. It was the first time the 2 juniors behind was taking the Formation Master examination, whereas the senior in front was here to take his 2-star examination. At this moment, the 2 juniors were slightly nervous. Their lips had turned white and their palms were soaked with sweat. There's no need to worry. I'll pass the first stage later on to give you all a demonstration of the happenings inside. Remember, the formation which one will undergo is completely random, so my experience is only for reference purposes. You mustn't deal with it the exact same way as I did. Do you understand? The senior said. Senior, rest assured. We'll pay some attention to it. Let's pass the examination so as to not let teacher down. The 2 juniors behind clenched their fists tightly. Good. I'll demonstrate the examination to you all now. Take note, regardless of which formation you meet with, don't be too anxious to get through with it. You must analyze it calmly, as only then will you find the life gate and break out from it. Seeing the humility of his juniors, the senior nodded his head in satisfaction. After which, he turned around and began walking over to the long corridor of the Sea of Formations. 1. As soon as he stepped in, mist immediately appeared. A formation had been activated, trapping the senior entirely. The first stage of the Sea of Formations, a Grade 1 formation. That wall. The duo turned to look at the wall by the side. By the side of the corridor, there was a wall made of special crystal which showed the situation of the one challenging the examination clearly. Their senior's figure was currently reflected on the wall, and at this moment, he was observing the situation around him with his eyebrows knitted together. In order to break out of the formation, one had to decipher the formation first. One had to know what kind of formation it was, where the life gate, death gate, and weakest link were. If one couldn't find these, one would never be able to break out of the formation regardless of how strong one was. Who? A compass appeared in the senior's palm and he studied it intently with a lowered gaze. After which, he took 3 steps left and 3 steps right, trying to test the formation's reaction. A short period of time later, his eyes suddenly lit up, as though having discovered something. Chuckling lightly, he started walking toward a direction at which he had decided upon. At the same moment, he gathered strength in his palm and struck out. Who? A buzzing sound echoed and the mist disappeared. A figure appeared before the duo again. It was their senior. Did you see that? This is the first stage. As long as you analyze it carefully and determine the origin of the flow of spiritual energy, as well as the various changes that occurs with your movements, you'll be able to deduce what kind of formation it is, confirm your current location and find the life gate. And just like that, you'll be able to break out of the formation. After clearing the first stage, the senior didn't proceed straight on to the second stage. Instead, he turned around and explained the various happenings to the duo. He was here to take the 2-star formation master examination. The 1-star examination didn't pose much of a challenge to him anymore, and the only reason he took it was just to give a demonstration to his juniors, as well as to calm their nerves. Yes. The 2 juniors nodded their heads. There wasn't anything wrong with the words of their senior, but the situation was very different when one was trapped in a formation. The surroundings would be completely different, there would be no point of reference, and it would be extremely easy for one to get lost. The most one could do was to analyze the flow of spiritual energy. Determining what kind of formation one was trapped in and where one was positioned within the formation would be extremely difficult. There were more than several thousand types of Grade 1 confinement formation. The same type of formation could be divided into several hundreds of subtypes. If one didn't possess vast understanding of formations, deciphering and escaping from it would be nigh impossible. Alright, I'm going to challenge the second stage now. Regardless of whether I succeed or not, you all should try to look properly and learn from my experience. Saying so, the senior took a deep breath and his gaze turned grave. As a 1-star pinnacle formation master, he was more than confident in clearing the first stage. However, the second stage would be difficult for him. Who? Stepping forward, the formation within the second stage was immediately activated. Just like before, a figure appeared on the wall by the side. Why isn't senior moving at all? Turning their gazes over, the 2 juniors soon realized that the movements of their senior had been peculiar ever since he stepped into the second stage. Previously, he immediately took out the compass and began walking around to analyze the formation. But now, it seemed as though he was in a daze, not moving at all. The white-robed junior suddenly thought of something and asked, "Crap, it couldn't be an illusion formation, could it?" Illusion formation? The green-robed junior's eyes widened in shock. An illusion formation interfered with one's psyche directly. As soon as the formation was triggered, those within would be plunged into a scenario that the formation master had prepared beforehand, leaving them unable to collect themselves. As such, it was more feared than confinement formations. Confinement formations were similar to a cage in the sense that even though one might be unable to escape, one was at least able to retain their thoughts and consciousness. However, in an illusion formation, One's thoughts would be forced to wander, and at that moment, one would forget even one's own name and purpose. Under such circumstances, there wasn't the slightest possibility of escape. Hoo! Just as the duo was in doubt, the pale face of their senior in the formation gradually grew more and more savage. His jinchi grew erratic, and he randomly struck out at thin air, as though a lunatic. Pooh! After a period of time, it seemed like his jinchi had been fully expended, and he spewed a mouthful of blood. Only then did he regain his consciousness, and hurriedly crushed the jade token in his hand. The mist disappeared and he appeared before his two juniors once more. However, this time, his face was withered. The second stage failed. Senior! The senior's confident disposition from before had disappeared without a trace. Instead, as he walked over, he looked like a defeated rooster. His two juniors felt even more flustered. It's normal to fail when challenging the sea of formations. I can only say my luck is bad for having triggered an illusion formation. Swallowing a pill, the senior's complexion improved slightly. Turning to his two juniors, he smiled awkwardly. Indeed, illusion formations are simply too difficult, the green-robed junior said. If only it was a confinement formation, senior would have definitely passed and become a 2-star formation master, the white-robed junior said. Indeed. If it was a confinement formation, I'm confident that I would have cleared the stage. Seeing that the admiration his two juniors had for him didn't falter in the least, the senior heaved a sigh of relief. I've done some research on the matter, and for the past decade, there was a total of 88 challengers for the 2-star formation master examination. Of that, there were 22 times that an illusion formation was triggered, but there wasn't a single person who cleared the stage in those 22 times. Those who cleared the examination were mainly those who faced confinement formation and beguilement formation. What about slaughter formation? Slaughter formation? The senior shook his head. That's even more impossible to clear. A single wrong move would spell death. It is already a blessing if one can survive within it, Lesby said, escape from it. It's that difficult? Upon learning how scary slaughter formations were, the two juniors began to tense up once more. Let me tell you honestly, no one has ever succeeded with an illusion formation or a slaughter formation before. Later on, when you enter, as soon as you realize that something is amiss, it's best that you crush the jade token immediately. There's no point struggling needlessly. The senior instructed grimly. Yes. The two juniors nodded their heads. Rest assured, senior. If we encounter an illusion formation or a slaughter formation, we'll give up immediately. Since even you are unable to clear them, how could others possibly succeed? At the very least, I doubt that anyone in this guild would be able to do it. Just as the duo was complimenting their talented senior, at the entrance of the corridor of the Sea of Formations, a young man walked over lazily. The young man looked younger than them, probably below 20. His eyes were reddened with blood vessels, and it looked as though he hadn't slept for several days consecutively. Exhaustion was the only thing one could see from his face. Who is this fellow? Why haven't I seen him before? The trio was taken aback. They had been in the Formation Master Guild for a minimum 5 years by now, and there wasn't a single apprentice or Formation Master that they didn't recognize. But that young man in front was completely unfamiliar to them. He's probably some apprentice who have just joined. With just one look, it's clear that his mental fortitude is lacking. He probably hasn't slept for several days due to anxiety for the examination. That's why he's in such a state. Indeed. Even his eyes are red. To think that the Sea of Formations could scare someone to this extent. The two juniors sneered. They were embarrassed over their previous anxiety, but this fellow topped them on it. His clothes were unkempt and his posture was slackened. With just one look, it was clear that he hadn't slept for several nights out of fear. What's wrong with the guild? Isn't there a limited number of slots every year for those taking the examination? How can a person like him challenge the Sea of Formations as well? The senior frowned as well. Chapter 483 Kick 1, and on top of that, one had to pay an exorbitant fee as well. Clearing the sea of formations would make one an official formation master, but not everyone was qualified to challenge it. One had to make a request beforehand and the guild leader had to approve it personally. After which, it had to be discussed upon during the conference of the elders, and a selection process would be conducted. And on top of that, one had to pay an exorbitant fee as well. Since this fellow was here, he must have obtained an approval beforehand. When did the guild fall to such a level that even a person with such poor mental fortitude could take on the examination as well? It was one thing for him to be deprived of sleep, but more importantly, what that displeased him was the attitude of this fellow when facing the sea of formations. There wasn't a single person who came to take the examination that didn't carry fear and respect for it. In a sense, this could be considered as one's respect for the occupation as well. Yet, this fellow was behaving so casually here. Was he that confident in the examination? Disgusted, the senior instructed. Let him go first. You can learn from his counter-example when he fails. Yes. The two juniors nodded their head with a gleeful expression on their faces. They didn't carry any doubt that this fellow would definitely fail. The young man who had left the trio speechless was Zhang Xian, who had rushed here from the library. After reading books for such a long period of time and mastering 2 Dawn of the Heavens path formation art, it would be a miracle if he wasn't slightly withered. Thus, as he walked over to the sea of formations, he adjusted his breathing to rid himself of his fatigue. Before long, he arrived before the trio. Noticing that the gazes of the trio were on him, Zhang Xian asked them doubtfully, "Are you all here to challenge the sea of formations as well? We're still conditioning ourselves. If you wish to go first, feel free." Seeing how that fellow didn't carry the slightest respect in his tone when facing an official formation master, the senior flung his sleeves and harumphed. "Oh. Since you all aren't in a hurry, I won't stand on ceremony then." It had been a while since he had arrived at the Formation Master Guild, and Zhang Xian was in a hurry. Since the other party was willing to allow him to go first, Zhang Xian chose to not turn the offer down. With a smile, he nodded his head and walked in. To go in without any preparation. Isn't he taking this too lightly? Seeing how the other party didn't try to push the offer or even look at them before rushing straight into the sea of formations, the trio felt as though their vision was spinning. That was the sea of formations. There was no formation master who didn't feel fear for it. To charge right in without even claiming the jade token to stop the formation, wasn't he being too brazen? He's just asking for trouble. Even Senior was unable to clear it easily, and yet this fellow dares to charge in without preparation. What else can this be other than courting death? The green-robed junior harumphed. Indeed. I bet that he'll be trapped in the first stage. By then, he will understand how fearsome formations are. The white-robed junior smirked. 1. At that moment, the young man walked into the corridor, triggering the formations. A mist slowly rose, shrouding his figure. At the same time, the young man's figure appeared on the wall beside. Whoa! Spiritual energy flowed in the surroundings of the young man as though billowing clouds, sealing off his 5 senses entirely, leaving him incapable of discerning directions at all. It's a confinement formation! Given how concentrated the white mist of spiritual energy is and how fast it is flowing, if I'm not mistaken, he must have activated the Cloud Ocean Confinement Formation. The senior recognized the formation. When one was trapped in a formation, one had to use a compass to determine one's location and analyze the spiritual energy flow to determine the type of formation. But when spectating from the outside, one could easily deduce the type of the formation through its physical properties. This was much more efficient and accurate than the former. As the saying goes, it is the passers-by who sees things clearly. Cloud Ocean Confinement Ocean? That is the most complex formation among the Grade 1 formations, and it is the hardest to deal with as well. That formation seals all of one's senses, leaving one unable to determine anything at all. Even if one could use a compass to discern one's location, if one can't accurately decipher the formation, it'll be hard to escape from it. They didn't expect this fellow's luck to be that bad. To think that he would meet with such a formidable confinement formation as soon as he entered. The two juniors shook their heads in sympathy. Even if he was lacking in capability, if he were to meet with an easy formation, he might still be able to clear it. However, having encountered such a formidable confinement formation, he could only raise his hands to surrender. See, even if you meet with a confinement formation, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can break out of it. Thus, you must be on your toes at all times, and by no means should you underestimate the formation you are in. You mustn't be like this arrogant and ignorant fellow. He's just looking for trouble. Seeing how that fellow inside didn't even bother taking out a compass, the senior shook his head, turned to his two juniors, and advised them. However, before he could finish his words, his two juniors widened their eyes simultaneously, and their faces starting twitching violently. "What's wrong?" Seeing the two of them lose their composure, the senior frowned. "Teacher has already told you that before challenging the sea of formations, you must focus your attention and avoid getting arrogant or anxious. Look at what state you are in. How do you expect to succeed like that? That's not it, senior. Look." With a reddened face, the green-robed junior hurriedly pointed to the front. "What's there to make a fuss about? Isn't he just trapped in the confinement formation? Don't worry, if he isn't out within 2 hours, the formation will dispel itself automatically. This is just a confinement formation. His life isn't at risk." Harumphing, the senior turned around and his latter words immediately jammed in his throat. His body stiffened, and his lower jaw fell to the ground. What? He thought that what he would see was a helpless young man trapped in a confinement formation, but contrary to his expectation, the young man was standing quietly not too far away, shaking his head calmly. And the mist that had shrouded around him had disappeared without a trace. In other words, the cloud ocean confinement formation which had left him fearful had already been broken. To stop the formation entirely. "I thought you wouldn't be able to overcome it? Even if you have the capability to do so, surely you don't have to be so fast? You didn't even bother taking out the compass or discern the flow of spiritual energy, and yet, in the time that I was lecturing my two juniors, the formation was already gone. Do you need to be so extreme? What just happened?" Frenzied, the senior hurriedly asked. "We also didn't see it carefully. We only saw him kicking the formation. Then, it simply disappeared," the green-robed junior said. "It disappeared with a kick? What in the world are you talking about?" The senior's face darkened. "I'm asking you how the other party overcame the formation, and you're telling me that he kicked it? Kick your head. Do you think that a formation is a living being that will stop with a single kick? If that is true, then we, formation masters, would have long gone out of business. This occupation wouldn't have been the dreams and fears of so many people. It was really just a kick." With his mouth twitching violently, the green-robed junior protested. He was already nearly on the verge of tears. He had seen with his own eyes that the other party sent a kick at the formation, and it immediately stopped. But how could a Grade 1 pinnacle cloud ocean confinement formation be broken so easily? It was indeed just one kick. The white-robed junior nodded his head in a daze. "Even he saw it, I'm not mistaken." Upon seeing his fellow peer confirming his words, the green-robed junior ascertained that he wasn't insane and hurriedly nodded his head. "Kick?" The senior felt frenzied. "Your heads must be the one that was kicked for you all to say such ridiculous words. Formations are intangible. Do you think it makes sense for them to be kicked? Enough. Regardless of whatever method he used, it's just the first stage, so it's still within an acceptable difficulty range. I don't think he'll be able to do it as easily for the latter stages." Seeing that his two juniors were getting incoherent, the senior waved his hands and looked at the young man in front intently. Since he missed it previously, he was determined not to miss the other party's actions this time. He had to get to the bottom of the matter, and see what method that fellow used to break out of the formation. After all, it hadn't been too long since his juniors started learning about formations. It was possible that they were deceived by some bizarre method used by the other party, thus missing the true way. Who? Thus, he gathered his attention to look at the young man. As expected, the young man who just escaped from the cloud ocean confinement formation didn't just stop right there. he proceeded on to the next stage. 1. Soon, he came into contact with the formations of the second stage, and a white mist rose up, shrouding the young man once more. It's an illusion formation. The senior narrowed his eyes. After being plunged into an illusion formation a moment ago, he was already rather fearful of it. Judging from the type of mist and the movement of the spiritual energy, he immediately deduced that the fellow had met with one, and from the looks of it, it didn't seem at all inferior to the illusion formation he encountered previously. Illusion formation? His two juniors were stunned. Sympathy immediately appeared on their faces. Honestly speaking, this fellow was truly unlucky. He met with such a formidable confinement formation in his very first stage, so they thought that perhaps his luck might be better in the second stage. Yet he met with the illusion formation which their senior failed at. That's right. In the formation, the clear air is rising while the turbid air is sinking. The collision of the two produces a unique moaning sound which will cause those hearing it to suffer from hallucinations. That was precisely how I unwittingly fell under the illusion previously, the senior said with a grim expression. Even now, when he recalled the experience from before, he couldn't help but feel fearful. As soon as he stepped into the formation, before he could even react, the unique sound reached his ear and assaulted his psyche, causing his consciousness to become fuzzy. For a moment, he was completely helpless and defenseless. If not for his body being jolted due to the depletion of his jinchi, he would have probably been unable to pull himself out from the illusions. It's that fearsome? The white-robed junior narrowed his eyes. Doesn't that mean that he has no chance of succeeding at all? Breaking out of an illusion formation requires one to have high mental fortitude. If one's mental fortitude doesn't reach a certain level, it'll be very difficult to escape from it. Given how he isn't even 20, even if he started cultivating from a very young age, how strong can his mental fortitude be? Even I have failed, less be said, him. The senior shook his head. He didn't see how that fellow had passed, but it showed that the other party possessed a certain level of aptitude in formations. However, illusion formations were simply too difficult. It wasn't just about one's comprehension of formations. More importantly, it was about one's mental fortitude. If one couldn't maintain a calm and impervious mind, it was very easy for to get confused and lost, thus resulting in one's inability to pull out from the illusions. In order to deal with illusions, he had undergone tough training for countless months, but even so, he still failed in an instant. He found it hard to believe that a young lad who wasn't even 20 yet could do better than him. Look, he's starting to kick around randomly as well. The heck? Previously, when he succumbed to the illusion formation, he also began striking out randomly. This fellow was starting to show the same symptoms as well. However, before he could finish his words, his body suddenly trembled violently. As soon as the young man's leg kicked out, the corridor, which was filled with mist, suddenly cleared up. The formation had been broken again. Chapter 484 Kick 2 in 1. And yet, this fellow's random kick actually cleared away the formation? That was a grade 2 illusion formation. When he was within it, he found it hard to even discern reality from illusion. That was how fearsome it was. And yet, this fellow's random kick actually cleared away the formation? Are you messing with me? He had said that the juniors claimed that the other party had broken through the formation with a single kick was nonsense previously, but this time, he had witnessed it personally. With a single kick, the illusion formation came to a halt. The overwhelming incongruity between reality and expectations left him on the verge of going mad. Possessing outstanding aptitude in formations, he had always been envied by his fellow classmates, and he managed to become a one-star formation master at a very young age. After driving himself to the core for many years to toughen up his mental fortitude, he still ended up losing himself as soon as he stepped into a grade 2 illusion formation. Yet, this fellow simply did a single kick, and the formation came to a halt. Did reality have to be so harsh? Did you collude with the formation to pull one over us? While he was on the verge of a mental breakdown, the anxious voice of the green-robed junior beside him sounded. Senior, do you think that it's calculated, or is he simply just randomly kicking around? Randomly kicking around? Have you seen anyone successfully breaking out of a formation by randomly kicking around? The senior's mouth twitched as his vision turned dark. He had seen people randomly kicking around to incapacitate an opponent. He had also seen people randomly kicking around and causing damage to their meridians. But he had never ever heard of a person destroying a formation with just a single kick. Formations were positioned to be aligned with the essence of the world. They were an unsubstantial existence, reminiscent to one's environment. Have you seen anyone destroying their environment through a kick? Thus, it was impossible for this kick to be of random nature. It was a purposeful, well thought out, responsible, and decisive kick. It was a kick made after seeing through the facade, peering into the very essence, and determining the fundamental flaws. Otherwise, how could a single kick break a formation? It was intentional? Then, how strong must his grasp of formations be? The white-robed junior's lips went dry. Even teacher would find it hard to do the same. Their teacher was a famous 4-star formation master even within the guild, but even he was incapable of breaking a formation so easily. I have no idea either. However, as long as he continues attempting the examination, we might be able to see through something, the senior said, suppressing his shock. There was a limit to his eye of discernment, and as such, he failed to understand how the other party broke the formation. However, if he were to continue analyzing the other party's action, he might be able to notice something. Perhaps, he might even be able to learn a thing or two from the other party, and in the future, when meeting these types of formation, he would be able to break them easily. Continues attempting the examination? You mean that he would challenge the 3rd stage? Given how easily he broke through a grade 2 illusion formation, he must be at least a 3-star formation master. Naturally, there's no reason for him to stop here. That's true. The trio hurriedly turned their gazes forward. Indeed, just like what they guessed, that exhausted-looking young man who seemed as though he would crumble at any moment continued advancing forward after clearing that illusion formation. At grade 3, a formation will require more than spiritual energy from the surroundings to drive it. Often, spirit stones will be placed at the formation core to power it. As such, the might of grade 3 formations is many times greater than that of grade 2, and with greater energy, there is more flexibility in the design as well. He won't be able to clear it as easily as he did before, the senior said gravely. All formations, regardless of the type or design, required energy to drive it. It was just like how cows eat grass and humans eat rice to move. There was nothing that could move without energy fueling it. As grade 1 and grade 2 formations were of low tier, they could be driven just by the absorbing spiritual energy from the surroundings. However, it was impossible for grade 3 formation to do the same. Even though formations could absorb spiritual energy from the surroundings, a grade 3 formation would still require an accumulation of several months before it could be used once. Taking the Great Xianyuan formation for example, it had gathered an immense amount of energy over 1,000 years, but it was sapped dry just with a single usage. As the Sea of Formations was the examination criteria for formation masters in Honghai City, there were innumerable people who were waiting to challenge it every year. They couldn't expect it to recharge itself just by absorbing spiritual energy from the surroundings. Thus, often, spirit stones would be placed at the formation core to drive it. With energy from the spirit stones, the formations would be able to display much greater might than what they were normally capable of, thus making them harder to escape from. This young man had managed to overcome grade 1 and grade 2 formations easily, but in face of a grade 3 formation powered by spirit stones, he probably wouldn't be able to overcome it as easily as before. In the short time which the trio spent chatting, the grade 3 formation was triggered and the young man suddenly disappeared amidst a white veil. In an instant, the figure on the wall seemed to have fallen into a treacherous trap. Descending flower petals alongside sharp glints of aura filled the surroundings, creating an extremely bizarre sight. The descending flower petals and sharp spiritual energy. Could this be the Qihong falling petal formation? The senior's lips quivered and he nearly fell to the ground from shock. Qihong falling petal formation? What kind of formation is that? The two juniors turned to look at him. They were only apprentices and they were here for the one-star formation master examination. As such, they weren't well versed in some of the higher-tiered formations. It's a slaughter formation. The senior's voice quivered. Slaughter formation? The two juniors shuddered and they nearly bit their tongues from shock. Of all the formations, illusion formation and slaughter formation were the most feared of all. Yet, this fellow managed to meet with the both of them. Wasn't his luck a little too bad? Illusion formations were already an exceedingly scary adversary. Even their senior was almost unable to free himself from it, so one can imagine how frightening slaughter formations are. This fellow didn't take the jade token before taking the examination. He couldn't possibly die inside, right? Suppressing his shock, the white-robed junior asked, "Is this slaughter formation formidable?" The Qinghong Falling Petal Formation is a Grade 3 pinnacle slaughter formation. It's said to be created by a man named Shin Qihong 1,500 years ago. The entire ground serves as a trap in itself, leaving one with nowhere to escape to. One will find himself dying tragically in the beautiful scenery. This formation has once killed a transcendent mortal 2 Dan expert, and it's known as the strongest among Grade 3 formations. Could anyone say it's not formidable? It was hard to tell whether the senior was nervous or scared, but his voice was slightly hoarse. Killed a transcendent mortal 2 Dan expert? This is already comparable to a Grade 4 formation. The duo's eyes went wide in shock. Grade 1 formations were capable of killing Tongxian realm cultivators. Grade 2 formations were capable of eliminating Zhongshu realm cultivators. Grade 3 formations were capable of subduing Zhizuan realm, half-transcension, and even prolonged longevity cultivators. And this slaughter formation actually managed to kill a transcendent mortal 2 Dan. That was already comparable to the strength of some Grade 4 formations. This formation wasn't to be trifled with. Even though they were hearing it with their own ears, they still found it hard to believe. The green-robed junior couldn't help but ask, "Then, will he meet with any danger?" "That'll be hard to say. It'll depend on his strength and his defensive measures. If he has nothing up his sleeves, only one conclusion remains for him: death." Shaking his head, the senior was about to continue speaking when he frowned. "Look, the formation is getting into action now." As he said those words, the sharp glints made of spiritual energy suddenly showed their ferocious side. As though arrows, they suddenly shot toward the young man from all directions. The might of every single glint was fearsome. Even a Zhizuan realm expert would be easily impaled by them. It depends on how he deals with the situation now. If I were in his position, I would try to dodge those glints before looking for a plausible escape route. Putting himself in the other party's shoes, the senior began to analyze how the other party could escape from this calamity. But at that moment, that ordinary leg was lifted up once again. "Who?" Facing the rain of flower petals, he kicked. Isn't that courting death?" Seeing that the fellow was still using the same move, the trio was frenzied. There were no threats on his life in a confinement formation and illusion formation, so his attempt to stop the formation with a kick could still be overlooked. However, this was a slaughter formation. Every single glint was a small dagger threatening to reap his life. There was no one who could possibly withstand their assault. And yet, he was kicking against them with his leg. "May I ask, what in the world are you thinking?" Frenzied, they were thinking that even if this fellow didn't die, his legs would also be sliced into innumerable pieces when the entire formation suddenly froze. "Who?" With a buzzing sound, the sharp glints in the air suddenly dissipated. The incomparably powerful formation, which would tear the young man apart at any moment, suddenly faded away as though snow melting in the presence of spring. The young man's figure appeared before the crowd once more. "He broke the formation? He succeeded again?" The trio looked at one another, and they could see the disbelief in their eyes. For a moment, it felt as though they were struck by a bolt of lightning. "He broke the formation with a kick once again. What in the world is going on?" The senior's body twitched. He felt a stifling sensation on his chest which made it hard for him to breathe. He thought that the other party had simply acted too quickly for him to properly discern what had happened, and as long as he could see it again, he would surely be able to determine the technique the other party used to break the formation and learn a thing or two from him. But from the looks of it now, it seemed like he was overthinking it. Breaking a formation with a kick. It was futile no matter how many times he saw such an eccentric move. How was he supposed to learn that? It's not over yet, look. Am I mistaken, or does it seem like he's going to challenge the fourth stage? The Greenrobe Jr. asked. Hearing those words, the other two immediately turned their gazes over. The young man who had just appeared in their sights shook his head, as though lamenting the formation's weakness, and started walking toward the fourth stage. If he were to pass the fourth stage, it would mean that he would be qualified as a 4-star formation master. A fellow who wasn't even 20 yet becoming a 4-star formation master? Who was the one who said that he wouldn't even pass the first stage? Who was the one who looked down on him just now? The trio felt their bodies stiffened, and they were on the verge of going mad. While the trio was about to lose their sanity, outside the corridor where the Sea of Formations was located, 4 incense sticks were lit in an incense pot. The smoke danced in the air, creating a tranquil atmosphere. Guild Leader Jem, what do you mean by that? You know that my 3 students are challenging the Sea of Formations today, and yet you still allowed that fellow to enter. Is this a personal attack? In front of the incense pot, a white-bearded elder lashed out furiously. 4-star Formation Master Wang Haoxuan, an elder of the Formation Master Guild. He was the teacher of the senior and juniors in the corridor. His 3 students were challenging the Sea of Formations today. This was something that had been decided upon 1 month ago. And yet, the guild leader simply came over and insisted on slotting someone in. He thought that the other party would be slotting his student, Xiaowu, in, as that fellow seemed ready to take on the 3-star Formation Master examination already. Yet, it turned out to be a young lad whom he had never even met before. Even if he didn't meet the other party before, if the other party possessed true capability, he would have nothing to say. However, look at that casual and lazy attitude. The other party seemed like he would fall asleep at any moment. Such a person was qualified to challenge the Sea of Formations as well? If he were to succeed, it wouldn't be too long before the sun starts rising from the west. Elder Wang, there's no need to be so infuriated. It'll help your students if another person were to challenge the Sea of Formations as well. Guild Leader Jing shook his head. If he is able to pass, that will of course be something good. However, look at his attitude. Do you think that he'll be able to pass? If he were to fail, won't he simply cause additional stress to my students? If they were to lose their composure, how are they supposed to take the examination? Wang Haoxuan harumphed. Challenging the Sea of Formation wasn't just about one's understanding of formations and skills. Mental fortitude also played an extremely important role. Otherwise, if one were to meet with an illusion formation, one would lose one's composure swiftly, and this could potentially result in failure. If those who challenged the examination along with them were to produce good results, it could serve as an encouragement for his own students to do well. But on the contrary, if the results were poor, it might leave his students feeling apprehensive, and this would prevent them from doing well. Don't worry. The reason why I slotted him into the examination is because I am confident in his ability. There's no need to worry. While consoling the other party, the fire on the first incense stick suddenly flickered and extinguished. This incense stick was known as the incense of the Formation Sea. It was forged alongside the Sea of Formations, and it would light itself as soon as someone challenged it. It would take exactly 2 hours for each incense stick to burn all the way down. If the incense doesn't extinguish by itself during this period of time, it would mean that the challenger had failed to clear the stage and vice versa. If the fire on the incense stick were to extinguish, the formation inside would automatically shut down. This was the reason why the senior said that even if one were to be trapped in the formation, there was nothing to worry about. Thus, the incense of the Formation Sea served both as a timer and a switch. The 4 incense sticks represented the 4 stages in the Sea of Formations respectively. Since the fire on the first incense stick was extinguished, it meant that someone had cleared the first stage. How about it? He has successfully passed the first stage. What else do you have to say? Upon seeing the sight, Guild Leader Jing chuckled. Humph, my students entered much earlier than him. Who knows, what if one of them is the one challenging the examination? Wang Haoxuan harumphed. Even though the extinguishing of the incense stick's fire meant that someone had successfully cleared the stage, there was no way of telling who it was. It had only been around 2 minutes since that fellow who was on the verge of knocking out had only just entered, so how could it be him? It must be his students. That is possible as well. Taken aback, Guild Leader Jing soon nodded his head in agreement. Even though he had witnessed Zhang Xian's astonishing speed in setting up formations, he had no idea about his ability in breaking formations, so he didn't dare to jump into conclusions. Even though the first stage was just a grade 1 formation, he knew that even he would be unable to clear it so swiftly. Thus, he also found it hard to accept that Zhang Xian was the one who cleared the challenge. Since it's your student who cleared the stage, there's even less need for you to worry. Shaking his head, Guild Leader Jing smiled. However, before he could finish his words, the fire on the second incense stick flickered and abruptly extinguished. The second stage has been cleared? Shocked. It hadn't even been a minute since the first stage was cleared, and the second stage was already cleared? How could anyone be that fast? With a perplexed expression, Guild Leader Jing asked, "This is your student?" Wang Haoxuan's face froze. He knew the capability of his students very well. It would at least take 10 to 20 minutes, or even longer, for them to clear a single stage. To break out of a formation in less than a minute. That was way too fast. Gotcha! Just as they were overwhelmed with shock, they saw the fire of the third incense stick flicker and extinguish. The third stage has been cleared as well? Wang Haoxuan nearly burst into tears. No matter how great his expectations for his students were, he knew that this was an impossible feat for the three of them. Of those three, one was intending to take on the 2-star formation master examination, while the other 2 was challenging the 1-star examination. Since the one challenging the examination cleared even the third stage so swiftly, it could only mean that it was someone else. It's that fellow from before? With widened eyes, Wang Haoxuan exchanged glances with Guild Leader Jing, and the two of them fell into a frenzy. They weren't surprised by the other party's feat of clearing the third stage, but that he was simply too fast. They could still accept it if the other party was able to clear the first and second stage easily. However, the formations in the third stage were driven by spirit stones, and even they would be slightly troubled to break out of them. To do it so quickly, how in the world did he accomplish it? Since he cleared the 3 stages so quickly, do you think he'll pass the 4th one as well? Recovering from the shock, the group immediately turned their eyes onto the final incense stick. This incense stick represented the 4th stage, as well as a grade 4 formation. If the other party succeeded in clearing the 4th stage as well, that would truly be fearsome. A 4-star formation master who wasn't even 20 yet. More importantly, for him to break out of all those formations so swiftly, exactly how deep was his understanding of formations? This was something they dared not imagine in the past. Wang. Just as they were harboring such thoughts, the fire on the 4th incense stick suddenly flickered, and for a moment, it looked as though it would extinguish at any moment. However, in the end, it stabilized and was reignited again. It didn't extinguish. It seems like that fellow didn't pass the 4th stage. I guess it's to be expected. After all, grade 4 formations aren't that easy to overcome. Seeing the flame on the 4th incense stick, it was clear that the person inside had failed to clear the challenge. Thus, Wang Haoxuan shook his head. The speed at which that fellow had cleared the stages had frightened him. He thought that the other party might be able to clear a grade 4 formation easily as well. However, from the looks of it, the other party hadn't reached such a level yet. But that was to be expected. After all, even he couldn't guarantee that he could break every single kind of grade 4 formation, needless to say, a young fellow who wasn't even 20 yet. If he were to succeed, that would be truly a miracle. But in any case, it is already formidable for him to become a 3-star formation master in his first examination. Guild leader Jing was slightly disappointed. From the speed and acuity at which that fellow set up the Grade 2's spirit-gathering formation, he thought that the other party's comprehension of formations wasn't beneath him. But it seemed like there was still some disparity between them after all. Even so, given how he was able to reach 3-star at such a young age, as long as he were to work hard, it would just be a matter of time before he becomes a 4-star or even 5-star formation master. He didn't clear the 4th stage? Seems like. Zhang sure isn't omnipotent as well. Hall Master Sai stood behind the duo. After seeing that the 4th incense stick wasn't extinguished, he shook his head as well. He thought that this fellow would cause a great chaos in the midst of challenging the sea of formations, just like how the other party did when he challenged the harmonious stream of flowing goblets. However, it seemed like he was just worrying excessively. At his age, it was already extremely incredible for the other party to be a master teacher and a 5-star appraiser. If the other party were to be a 4-star formation master on top of that, he might have to start doubting the meaning of life already. Heaving a sigh of relief, he was just about to go to the corridor to wait for the young man when the ground suddenly shook. Hong long long! The sound of a millstone being turned reverberated in the air as though an earthquake. What happened? A grave expression immediately appeared on everyone's faces, and even guild leader Deng's eyebrows were knitted together. The group started looking around warily. Who? Suddenly, the warmth in the room vanished and a bone-chilling breeze of air blew in. Kacha! At that moment, the flame on the 4th incense stick suddenly extinguished. And soon afterward, with a crisp sound, the pot cracked open. This. The guild's eternal spring formation which is sustaining the sea of formations has been broken? Upon realizing something, guild leader Zhang's vision darkened and he nearly spurted a mouthful of blood. Given that there were innumerable formations in the sea of formations, naturally, a larger formation had to be set up to control and manage them. And this formation happened to be the eternal spring formation which regulated the interior conditions of the Formation Master Guild. Since the warmth had suddenly disappeared from the air, and the incense pot suddenly cracked, there could only be one possibility. That was that the formation had been stopped. In other words, someone had broken it. But that was a grade 5 formation. Back then, the headquarters had specially sent an expert down here to set it up. Who could be possibly of achieving such a feat? In an instant, a frenzied expression appeared on everyone's faces. Could it be John Sure? With trembling bodies, a thought suddenly popped in Guild Leader Jing and Hall Master Sai's minds. The core of the formation was located in the depths of the Sea of Formations. At the current moment, that fellow, who was challenging the 4th stage of the Sea of Formations, was the closest to it. Other than him, they couldn't think of any other culprit. But if it was really him, how in the world did he manage to stop the formation? Guild leader Sheng had a dazed expression on his face. There were specific tricks to breaking a formation. What kind of trick did the other party use to be able to clear the stages so quickly, going to the extent as to be able to break even a grade 5 formation? Just as the group was overwhelmed with shock, a few figures walked out from the corridor. They were the 3 students who were supposed to challenge the Sea of Formations. Given that the formation operating the corridor had been broken, there was no way for the examination go continue on. Thus, there was no point for them to remain there and so, they came out. What happened? Wan Haoxuan walked up and asked. That person who just entered broke all of the formations. The senior shuddered as he spoke. Broke all of the formations? So fast? Guild leader Sheng walked forward and asked. How did he do it? Did he use Grandmaster Hong Bei's celestial chasing formation breaking art, Grandmaster Nan Yang's energy-seeking formation breaking art, or the 5-element formation master Senior Sai Yang's force-accruing formation breaking art? Of all techniques I know, only these 3 can achieve such speed. Ah! Guild leader! Seeing that the most authoritative person in the entire guild was questioning him personally, the senior was taken aback and his face paled. Reporting to the guild leader, he didn't use any of the 3 techniques. He didn't? Then what technique did he use? To the extent of my knowledge, these three are already the strongest and most formidable formation-breaking techniques already. Guild leader Jing frowned. Were there even stronger techniques that he was unaware of? What he used was. The senior's face distorted in frenzy and disbelief. A kick. Chapter 485, Quasi 4-Star Formation Master. A kick? Guild leader Jing and Wang Haoxuan were taken aback. They were baffled. What kind of formation-breaking technique was called a kick? That's right. From the first stage to the fourth stage, before all of the formations, he simply kicked, and then, the formations simply stopped. The senior said. A kick each? You mean that he used a kick to break the formation? Guild leader Jing and Wang Haoxuan nearly spewed blood. Yes. The senior nodded his head. The two great 4-star formation masters stared at one another. Yes? Yes, your head. What kind of formation-breaking technique is that? Do you think that makes sense? Senior is right. He simply kicked each of them to overcome the formations. But both of us saw it ourselves too. Seeing the disbelief in the guild leader and their teacher's eyes, the two juniors immediately stepped forward to testify. Could it be that he was lucky such that the formations he met were some of the more basic and simpler? Since there were three people saying the same words, Wang Haoxuan knew that it was unlikely to be a lie. Thus, he tried asking from another perspective. In the sea of formations, the formation one triggered was completely random, and so, luck played an important role in the examination. For the other party to pass all 4 stages so swiftly, could he have met with the weakest formations of each grade? Lucky? The trio's mouths twitched. We've never met a person who is as unlucky as he is. In the first stage, he encountered the Cloud Ocean Confinement Formation, in the second, an Illusion Formation, in the third, the Qinghong Falling Petal Formation. Cloud Ocean Confinement Formation? Illusion Formation? Qinghong Falling Petal Formation? Just by hearing the formations the other party encountered in the first 3 stages, the two 4-star formation masters nearly fell to the ground. Those were formations unparalleled in their respective grade. For a person to meet all of them in a single examination. Are you for real? How unlucky must one be for that to happen? More importantly, even though he met with those formations, he still managed to clear the stages so quickly? He even went to the extent of breaking the great formation sustaining the guild. What was the formation for the 4th stage then? Guild leader Shang hurriedly asked. Could the formation for the 4th stage be relatively easier? If I'm not wrong, it seemed to be the Drunken Heart Beguilement Slaughter Formation, the senior said. Drunken Heart Beguilement Slaughter Formation. The Grade 4 Pinnacle Formation which fuses Beguilement Formation and Slaughter Formation together? Guild leader Jing exclaimed in shock. He thought that after the fellow was unlucky for the first 3 stages, his luck might get better in the 4th one. Who knew that he would meet with the worst of the lot? That was definitely the most fearsome formation within the sea of formations. Ordinary formations only took on one type. They were either Illusion Formation, Slaughter Formation, Beguilement Formation, or Confinement Formation. Under normal circumstances, there would be no overlap between the two. But this formation had complemented the two together in a very profound manner. In other words, if one were to be trapped in it, one would first be beguiled before being slaughtered. Even guild leader Zhang had to admit that it would be difficult for him to survive if he were trapped in it. Yet not only was the other party fine, he even broke the formation and went ahead to get rid of the guild's main formation. Did you have to be so extreme? Indeed. After stepping into the formation, his eyes were dazed for a moment, so I thought that his mind might have succumbed to the formation. But in the end, with 2 consecutive kicks, the Drunken Heart Beguilement Slaughter Formation broke down, and soon afterward, the great formation of the guild was stopped as well. Seeing that there was no way for the examination to continue on, we decided to just step out of the corridor. The senior explained. A Grade 4 Pinnacle Formation and a Grade 5 Formation can be broken with a single kick? Guild leader Jing and Wang Haoxuan felt as though their worldly horizons were crumbling down. By the side, Hall Master Sai slapped his forehead. He thought that Zhang Shi would at least a little more reasonable here. But it seemed like he was too naive. That fellow was just intent on causing trouble wherever he went. While the crowd was overwhelmed with shock, the main character of the entire saga walked out from the corridor. In truth, the current Zhang Xian was slightly nervous. The first 3 stages were extremely easy to him. Even without using the Library of Heaven's Path, with just a glance using the Eye of Insight, he could easily find the core of the formation and kick them to a stop. However, the final stage wasn't that easy. A grade 4 pinnacle beguilement and slaughter formation. If not for his soul depth having reached 12.0, the level equivalent to a 4-star master teacher, he would have surely lost his ability to think rationally as soon as he stepped in and died from the formation. At the crucial moment, he activated the strength of the Library of Heaven's Path and found a few flaws. Knowing that it was too dangerous then, he didn't have the time to analyze the consequences of his actions, so he immediately kicked the 2 formations to a halt. Seems like it'll be best for me not to trifle with grade 4 formations in the future. Remembering the previous experience, Zhang Xian still felt a little fearful. If not for his high soul depth, he would have been dead by now. Since even a grade 4 formation was that scary, it was difficult to imagine how fearsome the higher-tiered ones were. Zhang Xian thought that formations were nothing but a decoration to him, especially since he could determine their flaws via the Eye of Insight and Library of Heaven's Path. However, he had just realized that his thinking was too naive. The truly formidable formations would kill one before one could even react. No matter how capable one was and how many flaws in the formation one knew of, it would be for naught. Zhang Shi, you managed to break through all of the formations? Just as Zhang Shi was preparing himself, he saw Guild Leader Jing and Hall Master Sai walking over with a look of awe. I only stopped them temporarily. Zhang Xian shook his head. Breaking a formation meant destroying the formation core. Under such circumstances, it would be difficult for the formation to work again. On the other hand, stopping a formation was different. A formation which had its operation stopped was just a formation that had been switched off. One could still reactivate it after that. To summarize, it was just the difference of whether the formation core had been destroyed or not. Breaking a formation meant destroying the entire formation, while stopping a formation meant using a unique method to stop its operation. Even though the effects were similar on the surface, there was a huge difference between the two. Stop? Hearing those words, Guild Leader Jing and the others heaved a long sigh of relief. If he had really destroyed the Sea of Formation's strongest grade 4 formation and the guild's main formation, then he, as the guild leader, would surely be held accountable. After explaining the matter, Zhang Xian asked, Since I've managed to clear the Sea of Formations, can I be considered as an official formation master now? May I know what cultivation realm is Zhang Shi at? Guild Leader Xing asked. I'm at half Transcension. However, I should be able to reach Transcendent Mortal 1 Dan within the next 2 days. Zhang Xian replied. Having compiled the Transcendent Mortal 1 Dan of the Heaven's Path Divine Art, as long as he managed to find a spirit-gathering formation, he should be able to achieve a breakthrough very quickly. One has to possess at least the strength of a Transcendent Mortal 3 Dan to apply for the rank of a 4-star formation master. Your cultivation is still lacking. Guild Leader Sheng frowned. Just as he had deduced before, the young man before him hadn't even reached the Transcendent Mortal realm yet. Bestowing him the rank of a 4-star formation master wasn't quite possible. As one of the occupations of the Upper 9 Paths, one of the promotion criteria involved one's level of cultivation. Without a sufficiently high cultivation realm to match up with the rank, it wasn't possible for the rank to be bestowed to one. A moment later, Guild Leader Jing said, How about this? Zhang Shi, I'll give you a quasi-4-star formation master emblem for the time being. At the same time, I'll report the matter to the headquarters, and if they give their approval, there will be no problems giving you the rank of a 4-star formation master. But even if they do not approve the request, given your talents, you should be able to easily reach Transcendent Mortal 3 Dan before 30. By then, you will be automatically given the rank without having to take the examination again. Quasi 4-star formation master? Zhang Xian was perplexed. There was such a rank? Indeed. This is how the guild deals with individuals who were able to pass the 4-star formation master examination when their cultivation hasn't reached the required level yet. It's the same for most guilds as well. There are some occupations that don't have a requirement on one's cultivation realm and an emblem is bestowed straight after the candidate passes the examination, but those number in the minority. Guild leader Xing said. Take the appraiser occupation for example. Right after Zhang Xian passed the examination, he was given a 5-star emblem. Quasi 4-star formation master works for me too. Then, can you give me the formation blueprint, flag, and core of a grade 4 spirit gathering formation? The main reason why he took the formation master examination was for this. Since he was already a quasi 4-star formation master, he should be qualified to obtain them. Wait a moment! Seeing that the other party was asking for the items, guild leader Xing shook his head with a bitter smile. He turned around to instruct Xiaowu, and the latter left the room. Not too long later, the latter returned with a jade token, formation core, and flag in hand. This is the formation blueprint for a grade 4 spirit gathering formation. You can record it down but make sure not to leak it out. Saying so, guild leader Xing passed the jade token over. Nodding his head, Zhang Xian took the jade token and immersed his consciousness into it. A formation blueprint appeared in his mind, and it even described the various ways of setting it up when on the differing geographical terrain. Wait, this spirit gathering formation can only extract spiritual energy from 10 spirit stones at once? After reading the content and the introduction within, Zhang Xian's expression showed slight disappointment. The spirit gathering formation was formidable, but it could only extract spiritual energy from 10 spirit stones at once. 10 was a huge number for others, but to Zhang Xian, it was far too insufficient. A single spirit stone would break within 2 breaths of his cultivation. Even though 10 spirit stones could sustain him for a little longer, all in all, it was only 20 breaths. That wasn't really much of a difference from before. In the end, he still had to keep switching spirit stones in the formation while attempting to achieve a breakthrough in his cultivation. To be capable of extracting spiritual energy from 10 spirit stone at once, this is already the most efficient spirit gathering formation in our guild. It is enough to sustain even the cultivation of a transcendent mortal 4-dan expert. Is it still insufficient for Zhang Shi? Guild leader Sheng frowned. A grade 4 spirit gathering formation could already be considered as top-notch within Myriad Kingdom Alliance. If one's cultivation hadn't reached the corresponding level, it would be very hard to set it up. If the other party still thought that it was insufficient, there was nothing he could do about it. After hesitating for a moment, Zhang Xian carefully asked, "Is there a formation which can extract the spiritual energy from all of the spirit stones placed within, regardless of the quantity?" He needed to expend an ocean worth of spirit stone to reach transcendent mortal 1-dan. If he could only use 10 of them at once, he would surely waste a lot of time. It would be best if he could put in all of the required spirit stones at a single go. In this way, he could focus his attention on cultivating. It was just like the petrol tank of a car. If it was the size of a teacup, regardless of how many petrol stations there were on the way, one would be terribly inconvenienced. On the other hand, it would be much convenient if it was the size of a fish tank. No limits on the quantity? Guild leader Geng's mouth twitched. There is one, but that is a grade 5 spirit gathering formation. Furthermore, I only have the formation blueprint. I don't have the formation flags and core. In Hahai City Formation Guild, the highest rank formation master, Guild leader Xing, was only at 4-star pinnacle. He wasn't capable of preparing a grade 5 formation, so naturally, he didn't possess the materials required to set it up. Besides, these items were exorbitant, and if one's rank hadn't reached the level yet, it would be difficult to obtain the items. Only the formation blueprint. A deep frown was etched on Zhang Xian's forehead. He'd spent the entire day reading books and taking the formation master examination. Did he really have no choice but to accept this insignificant spirit-gathering formation and cultivate slowly? If that was really the case, then it was really darned. Chapter 486. Imperial Jade Sword Acknowledging Its Master. Indeed! Guild Leader Jing nodded his head. This formation blueprint was left behind by a 5-star formation master back when the branch was first built. Otherwise, as a 4-star branch, even if we were to apply for a grade 5 formation blueprint from the headquarters, we might not necessarily be able to obtain it. The formation blueprints in the Formation Master Guild was as strictly regulated as the pill formulae in the Apothecary Guild. One was only allowed to access resources corresponding to one's current level. If one were to come into contact with advanced topics when one's capability hadn't reached the required level, it would only harm oneself. As such, 4-star branches like the Hawhai City Formation Guild was only qualified to collect grade 4 formation blueprints. If one wanted to access higher grade formation blueprints, one had to apply it from the headquarters and pay a certain price. Besides, this was only limited to the more basic grade 5 formation blueprints. As for the more profound materials, one would only have access to it when visiting a higher-tiered branch. Given how just the formation blueprint was so tightly regulated already, no more needed to be said about formation core and flags. Do I really have to head to higher-ranked Formation Master Guild? What in the world was this? He spent an entire day here and it turned out that even though there was a grade 5 formation blueprint here, there wasn't formation flags and core to set it up. Was he supposed to build it out of thin air? The higher the grade of a formation, the higher the demand of the quality of the two items. These were fundamental needs, so there was no compromising over them. Was he supposed to head to the Blacksmith Guild to learn how to forge these items just over a spirit-gathering formation? Putting aside how it would take up a lot of time, the Hawhai City Blacksmith Guild might, due to its limited rank, be unable to access the corresponding information required, just like the Formation Master Guild. Besides, even if he could find the respective blueprints for the formation flag and core, it wasn't guaranteed whether he could find the required material for it to forge them. Rubbing his glabella, Zhang Xian was distressed. He thought that buying a spirit-gathering formation would be an easy and joyful matter, and he would be done in a moment's time. In the end, he spent several hours and the problem still wasn't solved yet. Actually, even without formation flags and core, it's not entirely impossible to set up a grade 5 formation. By the side, Elder Wang Haoxuan seemed to have recalled something and interjected. Zhang Xian was taken aback. Through the books he had read through, he knew that these two items were necessities to setting up a formation. These were the basic materials and there was no way to avoid them. Could it be possible that there was some secret method to go around it? You mean that? Guild Leader Jing seemed to have thought of something as well, and he quickly shook his head. Are you joking with me? That's impossible to accomplish. Why? Seeing that the duo seemed to have an idea in mind, Zhang Xian asked curiously. What he means is, inscribing a formation plate. Guild Leader Jing smiled bitterly. But inscribing a formation plate is even harder than setting up a formation. It'll be impossible for one to succeed unless one reaches the level of a 5-star formation master. Formation plate? Zhang Xian was taken aback. Indeed. Why didn't he think of it? The formation plate was a unique material that could substitute formation flags and core. On top of that, it'll be impossible to inscribe with it without a specialized carving knife. I once bought a blank formation plate from the appraiser hall and tried inscribing it myself. However, the surface was incredibly tough and ordinary blades couldn't even leave a mark on it. How is one supposed to inscribe on it like that? Guild Leader Jing shook his head. The higher the grade of a formation, the greater the requirement on the quality of the formation plate. If the formation plate was too weak, it could crumble even before the formation was triggered. The carving knives in the guild were only suited for the use of 4-star formation master. Even though they had a 5-star blank formation plate, those knives were simply insufficient to inscribe anything on it, needless to say, draw out a formation. Can you bring the grade 5 spirit-gathering formation and formation plate so that I can take a look? If I really can't think of any solution, I'll drop the matter. Even though Zhang Xian knew that what the other party said was true, he wasn't willing to give up on this chance. Thus, he made the request. All right. Seeing the other party's insistence, Guild Leader Sheng nodded. Flicking his wrist, a jade token and a blank formation plate appeared in his hands. These two objects were the most valuable resources of the entire guild. As such, he carried them with him everywhere he went. Grabbing hold of the jade token, Zhang Xian immersed his consciousness into it. Just like the Grade 4 Formation Blueprint Jade token from before, the Grade 5 Spirit Gathering Formation Blueprint was also extremely detailed. All kinds of demands were written clearly on it. Zhang Xian hurriedly remembered all of the details. It's indeed quite difficult to set up. Reorganizing the information in his mind, Zhang Xian sighed. Even though there was only a grade of difference between Grade 5 and Grade 4 formations, their difference was immense. If one's cultivation hadn't reached the required level, even if one had the formation flags and core, it would be very difficult to set it up properly. It was just like pill forging. Even if a 1-star apothecary possessed a pill formula of higher grade pills, he would still be unable to suppress the violent energy within the cauldron to forge a Grade 2 or Grade 3 pill. If the different ranks were so easy to overcome, there would be no need to create such a clear ranking system within the occupations. However, if I use the Library of Heaven's Path to find out the various errors and flaws in them, there's still a chance that I might succeed. With this cheat code, even though ordinary 4-star formation masters would be hard-pressed to prepare a formation of such a high grade, there was still a chance that Zhang Xian might succeed. Taking pill forging for example again, if there were no errors in the sequencing, one could easily guide a 1-star apothecary to forge a Grade 2 pinnacle pill. Similarly, as long as there was no error in his sequencing, with just his cultivation as a half-transcension cultivator, there was still a good chance he could set up a Grade 5 spirit gathering formation. But these were just thoughts. Without the required resources, there was nothing Zhang Xian could do at all. I should take a look at the formation plate. Dumping aside those miscellaneous thoughts, Zhang Xian took hold of the blank formation plate. The formation plate was black and heavy. It was a little hard to tell what it was crafted from, but if one were to only look at one of the surfaces, it resembled a smooth copper mirror. This is a carving knife. You can give it a try. Seeing that Zhang Xian was still carrying some hope over the matter, Guild Leader Jing whipped out a carving knife with a flick of his wrist and passed it over to him. Grabbing hold of the knife, Zhang Xian drove the Jinqi in his body and slid it across the smooth surface of the formation plate. Jia! Jia! A screeching sound echoed. Even though the carving knife was sharp, it wasn't able to leave a single mark on the blank formation plate. Zhang Xian smiled bitterly. It seemed like what the other party said was true. Given how the carving knife couldn't leave a mark on it at all, it was impossible to inscribe the formation on it. Flaws! Frustrated, Zhang Xian muttered silently while holding the blank formation plate. Who? A book appeared in the Library of Heaven's Path. He slowly opened it. Grade 5 blank formation plate. Crafted using frigid silver and 9-inch gold by 5-star blacksmith Yang Shu. It is incomparably resilient, and only a spirit high-tier carving knife or a spirit intermediate-tier weapon paired with weapon intent can leave a mark on it. Flaws. Several flaws were detailed on the book. Sweeping through them, Zhang Xian realized that the flaws were beyond his current ability to exploit. Thus, he was preparing to put it down when he suddenly froze. A spirit intermediate-tier weapon paired with weapon intent can also leave a mark on it. A spirit high-tier carving knife was a tool specially made for 5-star formation masters. As such, it was impossible to obtain it. However, speaking of spirit intermediate-tier weapons, some of the transcendent mortal 4-dan experts possessed them. Thus, it wasn't too difficult to find it in Hahai City. In fact, a lot of treasures that Hall Master Sai gathered were of that level. As for weapon intent, given that Zhang Xian had even comprehended Sword Heart already, it wasn't a problem at all. The sharp edge that weapon intent provided was sufficient to make up for the deficiency in the quality of the weapon. The more Zhang Xian thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. As such, with glowing eyes, Zhang Xian raised his head and said, I know how I can carve it now. Is there any one of you who have a spirit intermediate tier sword? May I borrow it for a moment? Spirit Intermediate Tier Sword? Guild leader Jing was taken aback. I have one, what do you need it for? I'll explain later, just lend it to me for a moment, Zhang Xian said. All right then. Knowing that it was impossible for the other party to escape with his item, Guild leader Xing flicked his wrist and passed the sword over. Grabbing over the sword, Zhang Xian slowly drew it from its sheath. A cold gleam immediately reflected on Zhang Xian's face. Even without infusing Jinqi into it, he could already feel overwhelming spiritual energy weighing down on him from it. As expected of a spirit intermediate tier weapon, it was truly much stronger than the weapons he had used before. However, as soon as the sword was out of the sheath, a spirit wave began pulsing out from the sword. The sword was trying to struggle free out of his grasp. A weapon of this tier also possessed its own spirit. It could acknowledge a master, and if someone who wasn't its master tried to wield it, it could possibly go berserk and even injure the wielder. I apologize. This sword has been with me for quite a long time, so it's a little apprehensive of strangers. Allow me to talk to it for a moment. Seeing that the sword was on the verge of escaping at any moment, Guild leader Jing immediately walked up with a reddened face and stroked his finger on the blade of the sword, as though cajoling a lover. All right, Zhang sure needs your help for a moment, so listen to him obediently. Hearing Guild leader Jing speak up for Zhang Xian's stead, the sword seemed to have suffered a great injustice, and its trembling grew even more intense. Cough, cough, don't worry. I'll try again. Embarrassed, Guild leader Jing continued to stroke the sword and attempted to placate it. However, the sword didn't seem to be willing to give in at all. The more Guild leader Jing tried to persuade it, the more violent its response. Old Jing, you've owned this Imperial Jade sword for a very long time already, but you haven't made it submit to you yet? Hall Master Sai couldn't help but ask. He was the one who sold the sword to the other party 5 years ago. He didn't expect that the other party hadn't won the acknowledgement of the sword yet. Once a weapon acknowledged a master, it would respectfully listen to the commands of its master. In any case, it was impossible for it to react so violently. Cough, cough, you know that the acknowledgement process is extremely complex. After accompanying it daily throughout the years, even eating and sleeping with it, the situation is already slightly better now. It's beginning to listen to my instructions now. Don't worry, give me an hour to talk to it, I guarantee you that there won't be any problems. Guild leader Jing smiled awkwardly. There was no secret to making a spirit weapon acknowledge one. One had to accompany it daily and temper it with one's Jinqi. The Imperial Jade Sword had been with him for nearly 5 years now, and the spirit was on the verge of recognizing him already. Even though he was still a long way off from achieving an acknowledgement, the relationship of the two of them was already intimate. If he were to talk to it, it would still listen to his words. An hour is a bit too long. Pass me your sword. Hearing that it would take so long to calm down a spirit intermediate tier weapon, Zhang Xian shook his head. Pass it to you? Guild leader Jing was taken aback. Do you have an idea in mind? Unwilling to waste his time on words, Zhang Xian created a loop with his thumb and middle finger, and he struck the sword on its tip, blade, and hilt. Hoo! It was as though the sword had met something that had terrified it greatly, and it began to tremble violently. With a darkened complexion, Zhang Xian berated. You'd better stay put obediently. If you were to cause any more ruckus, I'll cripple you. Upon hearing those words, the sword immediately stopped its actions. Then, a sound reminiscent to the chiming of a bell sounded, reverberating straight within one's soul. Spirit Euphoria. Guild leader Zheng's body froze and his eyeballs nearly popped out from their sockets. The Imperial Jade Sword has acknowledged him as its master? This. What in the world happened? Chapter 487. Does anyone have a saber? The sword had accompanied him for 5 whole years, and the time he spent with it was even more than that of his own wife. Even so, he was still unable to fully tame it yet. On the other hand, the young man before him had only bellowed at it, and it immediately produced spirit euphoria. Euphoria your head! Could you be even more shameless than that? I treated you as though you were my ancestor, and not only did you not know gratitude, you even dumped me for someone else, acknowledging someone else as your master. Guild leader Jing felt as though his heart was being torn apart by countless blades. His chest felt so stifled that he could spurt blood at any moment. His entire face had turned green. What the heck was this? Could it be that he had to use forceful measures on the sword to force it into submission? Seeing the awful complexion on his old friend, Hall Master Sai slapped his forehead. This was an overpowered appraiser who could even make the harmonious stream of flowing goblets acknowledge him. Wasn't earning the acknowledgement of the Imperial Jade Sword a walk in the park for him? Zhang sure is just borrowing your sword, he doesn't intend to take it away. Fearful that his old friend might pass out at this rate, he hurriedly sent a telepathic message over. Only after hearing those words did Guild leader Jing finally calm down. He suppressed the urge to spurt blood and turned to look at the young man as a sliver of doubt rose within him. Wasn't he going to inscribe on the formation plate? Why is he borrowing a sword? The other party had declared that he was going to try inscribing on the formation plate, so why in the world did he make the sword acknowledge him? It's to inscribe the formation plate. Grabbing the grade 5 blank formation plate, Zhang Xian flung his hand. Pung! The formation plate lodged itself onto the wall not too far away, as though a mirror nailed onto a wall. After securing the formation plate well, Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up and a ferocious might gushed out from him. Flicking his sword, a radiant aura shrouded it. Sword intent. Sword heart? Hearing the crisp buzz of the sword, Guild leader Xing narrowed his eyes. Despite being a transcendent mortal Fordan expert, he hadn't comprehended sword heart yet. To think that a fellow who wasn't even 20 yet would have reached such a level. Appraising, formation, and now sword heart. What in the world was he incapable of? Weapon intent is incomparably sharp, and the might of a spirit weapon infused with it can be brought up by a notch. It can't be that you intend to use the sword to inscribe the formation? As the thought arose in his mind, Guild leader Jing nearly choked on his own saliva. A grade 5 formation plate could only be inscribed on by a spirit high-tier inscribing knife. However, a tool of that level couldn't be found in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. This fellow couldn't possibly be thinking of complementing the sword with weapon intent to replace it. It was easy to make mistakes during the inscribing process, even with something as light and small as the inscribing knife. To use a sword directly. Are you here to play around? Using a sword to inscribe a formation. Putting aside whether I've seen it before, I haven't even heard of such a thing before. You must be pulling my leg. Using a sword to inscribe a formation? Hall Master Sai and Wang Haoshuan's vision also darkened. This was no longer about being brazen, this was insanity. One might be able to wield a sword with astounding dexterity, but to use a 3 chi, 10 meters, long sword to inscribe marks that were countless times thinner than a strand of hair. How in the world did such a ridiculous notion even appear in his mind? Ding 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 ding! But before he could recover from the young man's actions, a metallic sound coming from the contact between the sword tip and the formation plate sounded. Slowly, a thin mark appeared on the surface of the smooth formation plate. It's really possible? His vision went dark again. What kind of monster was this? To be able to draw formation marks with a sword. Exactly how adept was he with a sword? To think that I often make mistakes even when using a carving knife. Wang Haoshuan's lips trembled non-stop. Even as a 4-star formation master, he still often made mistakes while inscribing on a formation plate. Yet, the other party was using a sword, which meant that he had to inscribe from a distance of 3 chi away. Must you be so exaggerated? It's workable. Contrary to everyone's shock, upon seeing the formation marks appear on the blank formation plate, Zhang Xian's eyes gradually grew brighter and brighter. He had only thought of complementing the sword with sword intent to do the inscribing on a whim, so he didn't really give much of an expectation for it. Driving his soul depth to the limit, his eye of insight flickered as he measured the various imperceptible bumps and depressions on the formation plate. Holding the sword tightly, he strictly followed the method detailed in the Heaven's Path formation art to inscribe the formation on the plate. If a master teacher were here, he would definitely realize that Zhang Xian had reached a unique state at the moment. Vanquishing facade, lucid mind, lucid analytical realm. After the state of mind to Dan heart of tranquil water was this lucid analytical realm. Knowledge was omnipresent, only waiting to be analyzed. At this realm, one would be able to peer through chaos to see the crux. At the same time, with a clearer mind, one's analytical power would grow substantially stronger. Paired with the eye of insight, Zhang Xian was able to inscribe the formation marks orderly, unaffected by any disturbances or emotions. Other formation masters had to use a carving knife to inscribe the thin formation marks, but Zhang Xian could do the same with a sword. While the Heaven's Path formation art played a part in that, what played a more significant role was this ability unique to only master teachers. To use a sword to inscribe a formation plate. It's no wonder why he can break formations with a single kick. Who in the world is this expert? By the side, the senior, juniors, and others were so shocked that their hearts were about to stop beating. Other people had to use carving knives to complete the delicate actions, but this fellow went on to use a sword instead. What left them even more frenzied was that he was able to do it as exquisitely as others. Even when witnessing it with their own eyes, they still found the entire sight incredulous. Ding 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 ding! After an unknown period of time, Zhang Xian retracted his sword and came to a halt. Then, he began to pant heavily. Sword intent is an actualization of one's concentration. It's very easy for one to get exhausted by maintaining the state for a long time, not to mention, when doing such a delicate job. Upon seeing his state, guild leader Jing tried to persuade him. There's no need to hurry. A formation plate isn't something that can be inscribed completely within a day. You should take your time. Sword intent represented a cultivator's comprehension toward swordsmanship. Activating it for a short period of time was still manageable, but even with Zhang Xian's pure Heaven's Path Jinqi, maintaining it for an extended period of time wasn't too possible. Nodding his head, Zhang Xian began recuperating for a moment. He stared at the formation plate fixed on the wall with a grim expression. Even though his comprehension of sword intent had already reached the level of sword heart, he was still unable to maintain that state for extended periods of time. In just a short moment, he already found himself on the verge of collapsing. If he were to forcefully continue on, he might possibly wreck his previous efforts due to his unstable condition. If sword intent is a bottle filled with water, if it were to be poured out, there will come a point at which it will run dry. Frowning, Zhang Xian fell into contemplation. I'm already dried out at the moment, but the formation plate isn't even halfway there yet. It'll at least take a day or two of recuperation for my sword intent to recover. Sword intent was similar to Jinqi. There was a limit to how much one could use it at a moment, and if one were to use it repeatedly, one would find himself sapped dry. And that was exactly what Zhang Xian's current state was. Even so, the formation plate in front of him wasn't even half done yet. What should he do? Did he have to slowly complete it over a course of few days, just as the other party said? If guild leader Jing were to learn of his thoughts, he would surely think that the world had gone mad. Even 5-star formation masters would require several days to inscribe such a high-grade formation plate with a carving knife. With a sword in hand, the other party still expects to finish it swiftly. Wasn't this clearly daydreaming? Just as Zhang Xian was conflicted over the next course of action, his eyes suddenly lit up. On top of sword intent, he had comprehended saber intent as well. Right. Since I can inscribe it with sword intent, saber intent should work as well. Even though my sword intent is sapped dry at the moment, my saber intent is still at its capacity. Having learned Heaven's Path saber art before, his grasp over sabers had reached an incredibly high level of mastery. Even though he couldn't activate his sword intent anymore, he hadn't expended his saber intent yet. It was still a full bottle ready to be used at his disposal. Chuckling lightly, he stood up and surveyed the surroundings. Does anyone have a spirit intermediate tier saber here? Even though it was possible to utilize saber intent through a sword as well, due to the differing nature of the two swords, the might and accuracy of his movements might take a toll. There was no need for Zhang Xian to take such a risk. Saber? Stars appeared above everyone's head. Aren't you using a sword to inscribe the formation plate? Why do you need a saber? I have one here. After a moment of hesitation, Hall Master Sai flicked his wrist and a 9-ringed saber appeared in his palm. It was heavy and ferocious, and one could feel a violent disposition from it. Allow me to borrow it for a moment. Walking forward, Zhang Xian grabbed the saber and flicked it lightly. A sound similar to the call of a dragon echoed. Good saber. From that, it was clear that the saber was a formidable spirit weapon. It wasn't inferior to the Imperial Jade Sword at all. I'll return you the sword first. With a saber in hand now, Zhang Xian tossed the sword that he borrowed back to Guild Leader Jing. Even though the weapon had acknowledged him as its master, he had stated clearly before he was just borrowing it. Since that was the case, he had no thoughts of claiming it for himself. Besides, he didn't have much of an expectation for his weapon. Even though the Imperial Jade Sword was excellent, he didn't possess any greed for it. And if he really needed one, he could always buy one for himself. If he had harbored such thoughts, he would have long carried the harmonious stream of flowing goblets away with him. There would be no need for him to negotiate with the Appraiser Hall and let them off. This. Catching the sword, Guild Leader Zhang's face turned red in embarrassment. Spirit artifacts possess consciousness, and usually, if the spirit chose to acknowledge another master, even if the original owner was reluctant to do so, most would still choose to part with it. After all, if one were to forcefully attempt to retain control over the weapon, not only would one be unable to earn the acknowledgement of the spirit, one might even incur its hostility. There was no use keeping a sword that was hostile to one. Since that was the case, one might as well sell the other party a favor. Perhaps, one might even get a good price for it. Thus, he thought that after Zhang Shi had induced spirit euphoria in the Imperial Jade Sword, he would have to bid the sword goodbye. Yet, the other party simply returned it back to him, showing no signs of wanting to claim it for his own. Zhang Shi, you seem to be fated with this Imperial Jade Sword given how easily you induced spirit euphoria in it. Such compatibility between a weapon and a human is extremely rare, and these encounters usually end up going on to become legends. I've owned this sword for nearly 5 years now, but still, I'm unable to get its spirit to submit to me. Since that's the case, I might as well just gift it to you and fulfill the both of you. Gritting his teeth, Guild Leader Jing presented the sword back to Zhang Xian. No one could easily part with a companion who had accompanied one over a span of 5 years. However, this sword had already chosen its master, and there was no use keeping it to himself. Thus, he might as well extend his generosity to the other party. After finishing his piece, he thought the other party would immediately take the sword away. However, contrary to his expectations, there was no movement at all. Lifting his head, it seemed like that Zhang Shi hadn't been listening to his words. Rather, he was tapping his fingers on several points on the 9-ringed saber that he just grabbed. Wang! A crisp call echoed from the saber. Guild Leader Zheng's lips turned white and his hands trembled. He nearly threw his sword aside out of agitation. Spirit euphoria. This saber has acknowledged him as its master as well? Chapter 488. Self-activating sentient formation plate. He had just said that spirit euphoria was extremely rare, and encounters like the one a moment ago would tend to go on and become a legend. Yet, at the very next moment, this saber came and did the same as well. Were they so eager to find a master for themselves? You all are spirit weapons. You're supposed to have your own consciousness and pride, and not submit to anyone easily. When did you all become so easy to deal with? If you are so easy to deal with, then what do the 5 years that I spent wiping the Imperial Jade Sword and nourishing it with my Jinchi count as? Guild Leader Jing felt faint-headed. He was just about to continue speaking when in front of him, Zhang Shi flicked his wrist and a burst of aura shot forth from the saber. Then, grabbing the saber tightly, he hacked it straight toward the formation plate. Be careful! Guild Leader Jing was taken aback. However, before he could finish his words abruptly stopped. Unlike what he imagined, the powerful saber chi didn't tear apart the formation plate. Rather, it left strokes and strokes of formation marks on it. The other party was actually using a saber to inscribe formation marks. While most transcendent mortal experts hadn't even comprehended a single weapon intent, he had actually comprehended two already. Just this sight in itself was enough to send him into a frenzy. Your swordsmanship is light and adept, allowing you to use it in replacement of a carving knife to inscribe the formation marks. Fine, I admit that you possess incredible mastery, so I'll accept it. But sabers are heavy and bulky, especially 9-ringed sabers. That one in your hand definitely weighs at least several dozen kilograms. Ordinary men would find it tiring just to lift it, but to use it to inscribe formation marks. How in the world are you doing it? Can formation marks be inscribed like that? Guild leader Zhang's vision turned dark and his body trembled in agitation. He had studied formations for more than 80 years now, and he had always thought that his aptitude was above average, especially when it came to inscribing formation plates. However, after seeing the other party's actions, he realized that he was sorely mistaken. Since his talent was great, could he use swords to inscribe formation marks? Could he use the bulky sabers to inscribe formation marks? Clearly, not. That was a thought he dared not harbor at all. Ding 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 ding. As the saber came into contact with the formation plate, the number of marks on the originally mirror-like surface increased swiftly. Just as guild leader Jing thought that the other party would complete the inscription process in a single breath, the other party tossed aside the saber in his hand, wiped the sweat off his forehead and looked over expectantly. Does anyone have a spear? The crowd. A moment later, holding onto a spear, the young man stood at a distance 4 meters away as he brushed the tip of the spear on the formation plate on the wall. Pung pung pung. The spear moved swiftly. And just like with the sword and saber previously, formation marks swiftly appeared on the formation plate. Grabbing onto their chests, guild leader Jing and Wang Haoxuan stared at one another. Even when using carving knives, the both of them had to inscribe the marks slowly for fear of making an error. Yet, this fellow used a sword, saber, and now he was going to the extent of even using a spear. If he couldn't complete it with his spear, would he use a hammer next? All of the formation masters that they knew of inscribed every stroke on a formation plate carefully as though a piece of art, fearful that it might break if they were to use excessive strength. Yet, the other party went to the extent of using weapons on it. Even though they were witnessing the sight for themselves, they still felt as though they were going mad. Some of the crowd clutched onto their chests while some covered their mouths as they witnessed the astonishing sight. In the meantime, Zhang Xian was still currently immersed in his work. Having consecutively used the weapon intent of 3 different weapons, even though he was left on the verge spewing blood, what was fortunate was that the formation plate he was working on was about to be completed. The final stroke. With glowing eyes, he flicked his spear and drew out an elegant arc at the very center of the formation plate. Hong Long! Carrying immense strength, the spear struck the surface of the formation plate, and a deafening rumbling sound echoed. The wall behind the formation plate was no longer able to withstand the immense pressure anymore and collapsed, leaving behind a gaping hole in its wake. Zhang Xian had fixed the formation plate on the wall to etch the inscription. Even though the formation plate wouldn't be damaged due to its toughness, the same didn't apply for the wall. Even though the Formation Master Guild had used the best green steel boulder as the foundation for the building, it was still insufficient to withstand the relentless rampaging might of the sword, saber, and spear. The corridor which the guild used to conduct the Formation Master examination collapsed, and dust rose up from the surface, choking the surrounding crowd. Cough cough. Looking at the ruins before him, the ashen-faced guild leader Zhang's mouth twitched. Are you here to take the Formation Master examination, or are you here to demolish the place? You first stop the main formation of our guild before going ahead to destroy the walls. What the heck was this? What kind of grudge does our Formation Master Guild have with you? Is the formation plate still intact? Hall Master Sai hurried forward. Hearing those words, everyone suddenly recalled the matter and turned their gazes over. Given how even the infrastructure had collapsed, would the formation plate still be fine? I have no idea. Zhang Xian scratched his head. Hurrying forward, he quickly retrieved the round plate that was crushed under a thick layer of wreckage. He wasn't being humble by saying those words, he really had no idea whether the formation plate was still fine or not. Under normal circumstances, when he finished the final stroke on the formation plate, the formation should have been completed. However, he couldn't have expected the wall to crumble. As such, it was hard to tell whether there was any deviation in his final stroke or not. There was a possibility that the might of the formation might be significantly reduced with this error. He lowered his head to examine the formation plate. On the smooth surface of the formation plate, innumerable strokes of differing depths could be seen. It looked like an 8 trigrams formation, yet at the same time, it seemed to harness the laws of the world within it. With just a single look, one couldn't help but feel faint-headed. "How is it?" Guild leader Jing asked anxiously. If a formation plate wasn't activated, it was hard to tell just by the formation marks itself whether it was a successful work or not. "Let me give it a try," Zhang Xian replied. Knowing this logic, he placed his palm on it and infused his Jinqi in. Hoo-hoo! Nothing. A failure? Everyone's face paled. A completed formation plate should be instantaneously activated as soon as Jinqi was infused into it. Given that nothing happened at all, it could only mean that the formation plate was a failure. There was only this grade 5 blank formation plate in the guild. After going through so much trouble, going to the extent of using sword, saber, and spear intent, he still ended up in failure. Everyone looked at Zhang Xian in sympathy. In the end, the might of those weapons was still way too great. Even though you curbed their strength, it's still unsuitable to use them to inscribe a formation plate. Wang Haoxuan shook his head. It wasn't without reason why everyone chose to use carving knife to inscribe a formation plate. No matter how well one's control over his spear, sword, or saber was, it was still a weapon crafted for destruction. It was inevitable that it would damage the formation plate, so Zhang Xian's failure wasn't too unexpected. At that moment, guild leader Jing suddenly shook his head. "No, that's not it. If it's a failure, the formation plate should crumble. However, it is still intact and the spiritual energy within it is still flowing smoothly. Clearly, it isn't damaged at all." "Ah?" Wang Haoxuan was taken aback. What the other party said was true. A formation plate was, in essence, the miniaturization of a massive formation into a palm-sized round plate. As such massive energy was being condensed into such a small area, the slightest mistake would result in the plate breaking into innumerable fragments upon activation. But even though the formation plate in front of them wasn't activated, the marks were still glowing as Jinqi flowed through it. There weren't any signs of the energy within going berserk as well. What was going on? If it was a success, why couldn't it be activated? But if it was a failure, how could it still be intact? Could the formation have been inscribed incorrectly? The spiritual energy gathering nature of the formation isn't working and that's why it is still intact. Wang Haoxuan asked. Inscribed wrongly? That's impossible. Zhang Xian shook his head. He had followed the blueprint strictly, and even used the inscribing method within the Heaven's Path formation art for it. Even if he had made an error in his final stroke, it shouldn't have deviated too much from its original intention. Just as Zhang Xian was about to use the Library of Heaven's Path to get to the bottom of the matter, Hall Master Sai's lips suddenly trembled as he walked forward. Can you allow me to take a look? Feel free. Seeing the other party's reaction, Zhang Xian was slightly bewildered. Even so, he passed the formation plate over. The reason why Zhang Xian managed to become a 5-star appraiser was mainly due to the help of the Library of Heaven's Path. In terms of understanding of artifacts, he was most probably still inferior to the other party. Hall Master Sai had immersed himself in the world of appraising for more than several decades by now. Even though he might not know much about formations, his intuition and eye of discernment still made his judgment a valuable one. The other party placed the formation plate on his palm. Who? Before Hall Master Sai could take a closer look, the weight on his palm suddenly disappeared. The formation plate released a light buzz before flying back into Zhang Xian's embrace. As I expected. As I expected. With a reddened face, Hall Master Sai's body trembled uncontrollably. Seeing the other party's response, as though having realized something, Guild Leader Jing couldn't rein in his curiosity any longer and hurriedly asked, "What's wrong? Is this formation plate a failure?" Wang Haoxuan asked as well. "Failure?" Taking a deep breath, Hall Master Sai calmed himself down and shook his head. "How could that be possible?" Then, everyone blinked in bewilderment. Even Zhang Xian was unable to comprehend the situation before him. If it was a success, why was he unable to activate it with Jinqi? "Didn't you all see the formation plate leaving my hand on its own accord? Do you all still not understand it?" Hall Master Sai spoke in agitation. "This is clearly the reaction of a sentient tool. It has assessed me to be unsuitable, that's why it chose to leave." "Sentient? You mean self-activating sentient formation plate?" This. Guild Leader Jing had to say this consecutively 3 times before he could bring himself back to reality. His eyes were widened and his body had stiffened. It was as though he had seen a ghost. That is the ability that only a grade 6 formation plate should have. How can a grade 5 formation plate achieve such a feat? Sentient formation plate? Wang Haoxuan also trembled in shock. He hurriedly turned his gaze to the formation plate in Zhang Xian's hand. The more he looked at it, the paler his face became. It seemed as though he would turn insane at any moment out of immense disbelief. "What is going on?" Seeing the frenzied look on everyone's faces, Zhang Xian was baffled. Even though he had collected all of the books in the library of the Formation Master Guild, and he had studied the Heaven's Path formation art as well, he hadn't assimilated them yet. Thus, he was still unaware of much of the jargon that formation masters used. It means that the formation plate has gained spirit," Guild Leader Jing said with a quivering voice. "Spirit? That does seem to be the case, but does it make a difference?" Zhang Xian asked. Only when the other party spoke about it did he realize that it was indeed the case. Just like the Imperial Jade Sword, Saber, and Spear from before, this formation plate seemed to have sprouted its own spirit. However, as Zhang Xian had only just crafted it, he'd failed to notice the matter. Due to the size limitation and inability to harmonize entirely with the environment, ordinary formation plates could only display half of the strength of a normal formation. If the formation master inscribing it is lacking in proficiency, the ratio might go even lower. Noticing Zhang Xian's doubt, Guild Leader Jing began to explain. Zhang Xian nodded his head, indicating that he knew about it. When he was reading through the books previously, he had learned about the unique nature of formation plates, so he wasn't too surprised over it. However, this nature only applies to ordinary formation plates. Sentient formation plates don't obey that law. With a flushed face, Guild Leader Zhang continued. Not only can sentient formation plates bring out 90% of the strength of the formation, it could even grow stronger over time. In fact, even without infusing Jinqi into it, it can activate by itself. Chapter 489. Huanyu Empire. A formation plate that possessed spirit wasn't only strong, it was also capable of absorbing spiritual energy to grow. More importantly, even without the Jinqi of a cultivator, it could activate by itself. Even though self-activation didn't sound like a big deal, it could prove to be useful in desperate situations. For example, if a person was under immense danger and wasn't in the condition to come into contact with the formation plate, a spirit tool like this could potentially save one's life. Thus, a sentient formation plate was one of the most sought-after protective measures of cultivators. However, only 6-star formation masters had the ability to create them. Furthermore, luck played a huge role as to whether an inscription would create a sentient formation plate or not. Given the rarity of the object, he had only heard of it from rumors. As such, he didn't consider this possibility right from the start. In fact, even after Hall Master Sai confirmed it, he still found it hard to believe that the young man before him could inscribe a sentient formation plate. And more importantly, it was with a saber, a sword, and a spear. Who could have thought that those weapons could be used to inscribe formation plates as well? Recovering from the shock, Guild Master Jing turned to look at Zhang Shi and sighed. To think that he had thought that his capability was at least on par with the other party previously. At this moment, he realized that there were unfair existences in this world known as geniuses. As soon as they made a move, one would only find themselves being left in the dust. To overcome 5 formations in just a few minutes, and stop the main formation maintaining the guild on top of that. To create a sentient formation plate using sword, saber, and spear. If it wasn't clear that his cultivation hadn't reached Transcendent Mortal yet, he would have thought that a 6-star formation master was going through all this trouble just to prank him. Disregarding the other party's shock, Zhang Xian asked, "You mean that this object can activate on its own accord?" "That's right. After one earns its acknowledgement, one will be able to communicate with it telepathically to activate the formation. There's no Jinqi required in the process at all." Guild leader Sheng nodded. "That's great." Hearing that it wasn't a failure in the inscribing process, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Touching the formation plate lightly, he could somehow feel an overjoyed feeling being transmitted to him. Given that the formation plate was carved using the inscribing method detailed in the Heaven's Path formation plate, and he had utilized sword intent, saber intent, and spear intent just for it, he would find it hard to believe if the formation plate was ordinary. "Acknowledge!" Dripping a droplet of fresh blood on it, he found a communication bridge being slowly formed between him and the spirit of the formation plate. "Activate!" With a casual throw, the formation plate immediately activated in midair. The spiritual energy within the range of several thousand meters came gushing in as though a whirlpool was pulling them in. Due to the intensity of the attraction, a slight moaning sound reminiscent of frenzied wind being blown past the cave could be heard. Strong. Seeing the rate at which spiritual energy in the surroundings was being pulled in, everyone was taken aback. As expected of a grade 5 formation, its might was indeed fearsome. Even though they weren't in the formation, they could still sense the overwhelming concentration of the spiritual energy within. It was at least 3 times that of the external surroundings. If one were to cultivate within it, one's rate of cultivation would definitely be increased by several folds. Furthermore, a sentient formation plate possessed the ability to repair its own damages. As long as one didn't use it too frequently or cause irreparable damage to it, there wasn't any limits on its usage. Not bad! Sensing that the might of the formation was similar to that described in the blueprint, Zhang Xian nodded his head in satisfaction. Grabbing forward, he put away the formation plate and turned to the elder not too far away. "Guild leader Zheng, may I know the price of this blank formation plate?" The sword, saber, and spear that Zhang Xian used for the inscribing process were borrowed, so he just had to return it. However, this blank formation plate was bought by the other party, but he was now claiming it for his own. Naturally, it was only right for him to ask for the price to compensate the other party. "Zhang Shi, there's no need to worry about it. The formation plate is useless with me anyway, so just consider it as a gift from my part." Guild leader Sheng hurriedly turned down the matter. The young man before him was a person who was capable of inscribing a sentient formation plate. Given his young age, it was likely the other party would go on and accomplish great things in the future. Thus, Guild leader Jing wanted to make use of this opportunity to strike up an amiable relationship with the other party. "A gift?" Frowning, Zhang Xian shook his head. "It's not right for me to accept a gift when I haven't done anything deserving of it. How about this? Since you haven't earned the acknowledgement of the Imperial Jade Sword yet, I'll give you a hand in it. This can count as compensation for the formation plate." Accepting the favor of another meant to be tied in a karmic relationship with the other party. This burden was a little heavy to bear. "You'll give me a hand in earning the acknowledgement of the Imperial Jade Sword?" "It's possible. To help other people earn the acknowledgement of spirit equipment." Guild leader Jing was taken aback. Earning the acknowledgement of a sword concerns one's intimacy with one's weapon. To succeed, one had to spend time with it so as to tighten their bonds. Cough cough, it's possible to help one in that? Why does it sound as though you are helping someone consummate their marriage? Of course. With a faint smile, Zhang Xian stretched his hand forward, grabbed the Imperial Jade Sword from his hand, and stroked it gently. The Imperial Jade Sword has already acknowledged you as its master, so how can it possibly accept me? Thinking that it was impossible, Guild Leader Jing shook his head. Don't worry, Zhang Shi is a 5-star appraiser. Since he says that he can make the Imperial Jade Sword acknowledge you, he must have an idea in mind. Seeing the disbelief in his old friend's mind, Hall Master Sai stroked his beard and said, his trust in the Zhang Shi's capability was nearly unconditional at this point. In his view, as long as the other party said that it was possible, it had to be possible. It was almost at the level of blind admiration already. An idea in mind. Seeing the confident expression of his old friend and recalling the various astounding deeds that the other party had done, Guild Leader Jing was suddenly filled with hope. Just as he was curious to see what kind of astounding means would this legendary figure use, the other party's cold, harsh voice sounded. You'd better acknowledge Guild Leader Jing as your master and listen to him obediently. Otherwise, you know that I can cripple you within seconds, right? Cough, cough. Guild Leader Jing and Hall Master Sai choked on their saliva. Their faces turned green and they nearly burst into tears on the spot. They were curious to know what means the other party would use, but to think that it would be a threat. Do you not know that all spirit equipment are incomparably arrogant, and the one thing they do not fear are threats? To cripple the equipment within seconds. If it operated the same as a human, he wouldn't have been put into such a difficult situation in the first place. Why did this young man feel unfathomable, as though an incredible expert in one moment, and a naive amateur in the next? Zhang Shi. Suppressing his dismal, Guild Leader Jing shook his head. He was just about to advise the other party to not waste his effort when he heard a whiz sound. The Imperial Jade Sword suddenly flew toward him. Hurriedly catching it, he immediately felt the spirit euphoria within it. Clearly, the sword was acknowledging him as its master. Guild Leader Jing went into a frenzy. What was with this? If the other party's "I'll cripple you within seconds" actually worked, then what did his 5 years count for? If it was under normal circumstances, he would surely dance in joy upon seeing that the sword which he had been keeping beside him for numerous years was acknowledging him. But somehow, in the current situation, he didn't feel the slightest delight. Instead, he felt so stifled that he could spurt blood. It looks like I shouldn't be so gentle when trying to win the acknowledgement of spirit weapons in the future. Seems like callousness is the way to go. Dripping his blood on the Imperial Jade Sword to seal the relationship, Guild Leader Jing reflected on his own mistakes. I still have something to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave now. Having repaid the debt of the blank formation plate, Zhang Xian clasped his fist and bade farewell. His purpose at the Formation Master Guild was to find a spirit-gathering formation. Since he had already succeeded, it was time for him to return to raise his cultivation. Farewell! Guild Leader Jing nodded his head. Watching the young man and Hall Master Sai leaving without any hesitation, Wang Haoxuan stepped forward and asked Guild Leader Jing, what kind of person is this Zhang Shi? I've no idea as well. However, this matter has to be reported to the headquarters. The other party isn't even a transcendent mortal yet, but he was able to use a sword, saber, and spear to inscribe a sentient formation plate. Recalling the other party's actions, Guild Leader Zhang's mouth twitched uncontrollably. That's right, we have to report it immediately. Wang Haoxuan nodded in agreement. Since the other party had taken the Formation Master examination in their branch, he could be considered as one of their members. If they were to report this, the headquarters would surely reward them handsomely. The resources obtained from the reward would prove to be useful to them in breaking through their bottlenecks, and getting their own 5-star Formation Master would just be a matter of time. But before that, we have to look into Zhang Shi's background, where he came from and where he is heading to for the report. I'll be depending on you for this. Guild Leader Jing instructed. Yes. Wang Haoxuan nodded his head and hurriedly left. Not too long later, he returned with a piece of paper in hand. The paper detailed various information concerning Zhang Xian. As one of the greatest power on the continent, it wasn't difficult for the Formation Master Guild to look into the affairs of an individual. Not to mention, Zhang Xian and the others didn't try to conceal their trail either. He came from Tianxian Kingdom? In less than 3 months, he became a 2-star master teacher, 3-star apothecary, 3-star physician, 3-star painter, 2-star beast tamer, 5-star appraiser, quasi 4-star formation master. Browsing through the contents, guild leader Zheng's lips went dry. The other party's capability had far exceeded his expectations. In less than 3 months, the other party had walked from a remote location like Tianxian Kingdom all the way to the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. Despite his young age, he was already a member of 7 occupations, and some of those were even higher than his. How in the world did he do it? I was also very shocked when I first saw it. Wang Haoxuan smiled bitterly. After gathering the news, he nearly died from shock. Actually, I wasn't the one who gathered this information. Zhang Shi had eradicated a small clan known as the Lin clan in Tianwu Kingdom, and that Lin clan had extremely close ties with the local Formation Master Guild. Most of the information on the paper was retrieved from there. Wang Haoxuan continued. However, even though we have so much information on his background, we still have no clue as to what he's going to do next. Should we ask him about it before reporting it to the headquarters? Guild leader Jing shook his hands as he said, "There's no need for it. Given his talents, there's little doubt that he's going to participate in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance's Master Teacher Tournament." Master Teacher Tournament? Wang Haoxuan was taken aback. The Master Teacher Tournament, which involves 27 other powers of influence rivaling the Myriad Kingdom Alliance? That's right. This is a tournament conducted by Huanyu Empire's Master Teacher Pavilion in collaboration with the 27 subordinate Master Teacher Pavilions under them. It's a grand gathering that happens once every decade. Given the extent of the other party's capability, he will surely participate in it. Even if that isn't the case, he would surely at least spectate the tournament, Guild leader Xing said. Indeed. As an event initiated by the Tier 2 Huanyu Empire, it boasts of handsome reward. There is no genius who could resist its allure. Wang Haoxuan nodded in agreement. Given Zhang Shi's capability, he will definitely participate in it. All right, you should hurry up and report it. Even though we can't rival the Master Teacher Pavilion, we should at least make Formation Master his secondary occupation. We mustn't allow his talents to be buried in the dust. Saying so, Guild leader Jing and Wang Haoxuan began walking toward the communication wall. Chapter 490, Transcendent Mortal. Returning to the appraiser hall, Zhang Xian immediately headed to his living quarters, secluded himself within a chamber, and immediately activated the Spirit Gathering Formation. Having collected innumerable books, learned 2 Dawn of Heaven's Path formation art, sap dry his sword intent, saber intent, and spear intent, Zhang Xian was already terribly exhausted. If not for an adamant will driving him, he would have long collapsed. Sitting at the center of the Spirit Gathering Formation, he flicked his hands and a pile of spirit stones appeared around him. Tzzzzzzzzzzzzzz. As soon as the spirit stones were placed in the formation, the spiritual energy harnessed within was immediately extracted. As though vegetables being placed within an oiled wok, a sizzling sound could be heard. After which, the concentration of spiritual energy in the surroundings started rising swiftly. 3-fold. 4-fold. 5-fold. In the blink of an eye, the concentration in the area had already reached 6-fold of the surroundings. Pili Pala. As spiritual energy was being drawn rapidly, some of the spirit stones started crumbling. Paying it no heed, Zhang Xian continued adding in more spirit stones to fuel the formation. Eventually, when the concentration finally reached 10-fold, Zhang Xian stopped. At this concentration, it was already no different from the rate of absorbing spiritual energy from the spirit stones straight already. Begin! Since all preparations were done, Zhang Xian immediately widened the pores across his entire body to absorb the thick spiritual energy in the surroundings rapidly. Then, converting them into Heaven's Path Xingqi, he refilled the energy expenditure he had incurred before. 2 hours later, his fatigue disappeared without a trace and he felt revitalized. He had finally reached his peak condition. Breakthrough! Muttering softly, the overflowing Heaven's Path Xingqi in his body began to strike at the barriers restraining his further progress. Kacha! After a seemingly long period of time, a crisp sound reminiscent of a small chick breaking out of its shell sounded. As though having knocked down a ceiling capping him, Jiang Xian's body underwent an astonishing metamorphosis. Nourished, every single cell on his body and his soul were undergoing a rapid qualitative evolution. His lifespan, which was capped at 100, began rising at a speed visible to the eye. 110. 120. 130. His muscles and skin seemed to have been reborn, and they became even more supple and powerful. Of one's entire life, the growth stage at which one had the best skin was infancy. During that period time, one's body would be overflowing with vitality, allowing all injuries to heal swiftly. But along with the rise in one's age, as one consumed material food and the impurities in one's body started to increase, one's body would start to decline. As one's regenerative function lost out to the decline, one's bodily functions would gradually fail. The transcendent mortal realms served to overcome this limit. One who succeeded in the breakthrough would be brought back to their prime. Even a person who had a single foot in the grave would be overflowing with vitality. Even though the heaven's path Jinqi that Jiang Xian cultivated was incomparably pure and was highly beneficial to both his body and his soul, it still wasn't sufficient to grant him the strength and lifespan of a transcendent mortal. Thus, before this breakthrough, he was still constrained by the limits of a mortal. This was the difference in the level of existence. Take an ant and an elephant, for example. Even the strongest ant could never defeat the weakest elephant. Thus, having this step into new realms, his body seemed to have been nourished by the most concentrated energy of the world, making him feel incredibly energized and revitalized. Continue. After reaching the prolonged longevity realm, Jiang Xian threw out another bunch of spirit stones and continued driving the transcendent mortal one Dan Heaven's path divine art. Just like that, he gradually broke through the various bottlenecks in his cultivation. Prolonged longevity realm primary stage. Prolonged longevity realm intermediate stage. Prolonged longevity realm advanced stage. 2 hours later, Jiang Xian finally reached prolonged longevity realm pinnacle. And at that moment, his lifespan had been increased from 100 to 200 years. At prolonged longevity realm pinnacle, one's lifespan would be doubled. When he exhaled deeply, unlike the usual turbid gas filled with impurities that were clogging up his meridians, it carried the light fragrance of nature. Having reached the level of a transcendent mortal, one's physical body would possess the qualities similar to a newborn infant, untarnished by impurities or pollutants. Due to the overwhelming vitality within a child, it was extremely rare for them to suffer from bad breath. The current Jiang Xian was also the same. Hearing, sight, smell. My 5 senses have been significantly enhanced as well. Opening his eyes and looking at the distance, he could see the ants several dozen meters away clearly. In fact, even the singing of the canaries several hundred meters away were crystal clear to his ears. The rise in his cultivation realm had enhanced his 5 senses significantly. His reaction speed had increased by 2-fold. The enhanced senses made it easier for him to harmonize with the nature, thus facilitating the absorption of spiritual energy and increasing his rate of cultivation. No wonder there was this saying beneath the transcendent mortals are all ants. Only upon reaching this realm could one understand how fearsome it was. It seems like Ding Hong is one of the weaker cultivators at prolonged longevity realm. Otherwise, it would definitely be impossible for me to subdue him so easily. Upon reaching this level, Jiang Xian realized how fortunate he was in his fight with Ding Hong back then. Without proper guidance, that fellow had fumbled his way through the realms. Even though he had successfully made the breakthrough, he was one of the weakest ones of the tier. If Jiang Xian had met with a transcendent mortal one Dan cultivator from the Myriad Kingdom Alliance back then instead, he would definitely have been in for a hard fight. After reaching transcendent mortal one Dan pinnacle, my strength, when totaled up, adds up to more than 200,000 ding. Clenching his fists tightly, Jiang Xian chuckled in joy. At prolonged longevity realm, only one's lifespan would be enhanced. As such, before reaching transcendent mortal 2 Dan, one's strength would be capped at 100,000. On the other hand, Jiang Xian had already achieved that might at half-transcension realm. At this moment, along with the rise in his cultivation realm, his strength had increased by 2 times, thus reaching 200,000. In terms of just strength, he was already comparable to a transcendent mortal 2-Dan Origin Energy Realm Intermediate Stage expert. At Origin Energy Realm Primary Stage, one would possess the strength of 150,000 ding, 200,000 ding at Intermediate Stage, 250,000 ding at Advanced Stage, and 300,000 ding at Pinnacle. And this was only in terms of Jinqi. If one were to factor in one's comprehension of the nature, the strength at one's disposal would be much greater. I can achieve breakthroughs swiftly via Heaven's Path Divine Art, but the expense is truly too great. Having gathered more than 1,000 cultivation technique manuals, Jiang Xian understood the rate of cultivation of ordinary transcendent mortal 1-Dan cultivators. Even the most talented person would require several years of hard work to climb from primary stage to pinnacle. However, Jiang Xian had done the same in just 2 hours. Anyone who had witnessed the speed of his cultivation could definitely die of shock. But while the speed was astounding, the expense was fearsome as well. After the breakthrough, his Heaven's Path Jinqi had undergone a qualitative change, becoming even purer and less viscous. If the Heaven's Path Jinqi were sand grains that could easily pass through small spaces previously, then at this moment, it was no different from flowing water. It could even slip through gaps that were indiscernible to the eye. With the increase in the purity of his Jinqi, naturally, the requirements for Jiang Xian's spiritual energy rose proportionately as well. Even though he had earned several 10,000 spirit stones through various means, there wasn't much of it that was sufficiently pure for him to absorb. Almost 90% of the spiritual energy contained within each spirit stone went to waste along with his cultivation. He thought that the amount of spirit stones he had earned should be sufficient for him to reach Transcendent Mortal 3-Dan or 4-Dan, but from the looks of it, he was being too naive. The spirit stones that he had earned from the appraiser hall, the wager, guidance, and sale of the soulless metal humanoid, had nearly dried out. In other words, he used up nearly 50,000 spirit stones just to advance from Prolonged Longevity Realm Primary Stage to Prolonged Longevity Realm Pinnacle. If it was anyone else, this amount of spirit stones would be more than sufficient for them to reach Transcendent Mortal 4-Dan. I'm back to becoming a poor bloke again. Smiling bitterly, Jiang Xian shook his head helplessly. 3 days ago, he had to go through so much trouble just to make 50,000 spirit stones. He thought that he had earned a huge wealth capable of rivaling several kingdoms already. Yet to think that he would be back to square one after a cultivation session. It was no wonder why people say cultivating was a money-burning business. From the looks of it, the description couldn't be any more apparent. Without sufficient spirit stones, it would be difficult for him to raise his cultivation realm. This kind of low-tier spirit stone is no longer sufficient to fuel my cultivation. Smiling bitterly, Jiang Xian contemplated over his future course of action. Several 10,000 spirit stones were only sufficient to raise his cultivation by 1 realm. If he were to attempt to advance through origin energy, or even higher realms, it was unimaginable how many spirit stones would be required. It felt as though even if he were to earn several 100,000 or even 1,000,000 spirit stones, it would still be far from sufficient to support his cultivation. Furthermore, there would come a point that the quality he required for his cultivation would exceed the purity of the spirit stone. At that point, all of the spirit stones would lose their worth. If Jiang Xian wanted to raise his cultivation swiftly, he would have to find some way to obtain a middle-tier spirit stone. This kind of spirit stone possessed spiritual energy of extremely high purity, which was much easier and more convenient to absorb. 3 days is up. Luo Zhu should be done by now. I should hurry over to the Soul Oracle tomb to find a way to save Lu Chong. Standing up, Jiang Xian walked out of the chamber. It was already the 2nd day when Jiang Xian went to the Formation Master Guild. After the hassle there and the 4 hours spent on cultivation after returning, it was already around the promised time they agreed on. This trip to the Soul Oracle tomb would determine whether Lu Chong could be awoken from his coma or not. Jiang Xian would not allow any hiccups to occur. Heading to the lounge, he realized that Luo Zhu had already arrived. Zhao Ye and the others were also done with their cultivation, and they were standing by the side of the room. His students didn't let down his expectations. In 3 days' time, they had all reached Jizuan realm. This was especially so for Zhao Ye, who had reached Jizuan realm intermediate stage. From her aura, one could vaguely feel overwhelming power. Sun Chang hadn't been slacking off the past 3 days as well. He had completely reinforced his cultivation as a transcendent mortal one Dan. Even though he was still a far way off from matching up to Zhang Xian, as compared to his cultivation of Jinxi realm a few months ago, he had come quite a long way in this limited period of time. Zhang Shi. Upon noticing his arrival, everyone turned their gazes over. Are you done with the preparations? If so, let's set off, Zhang Xian said. I'm done with the preparations. Luo Zhu nodded his head. The items he needed for the trip to the Soul Oracle Tomb were all ready. Do you all intend to accompany us to the Soul Oracle Tomb, or are you all returning to the Myriad Kingdom Alliance? Zhang Xian turned to Zhao Feiwu and the others. The Soul Oracle Tomb is dangerous, so we'll pass on the offer. Jin Sohai was just about to reject the request when Zhao Feiwu interrupted. Of course we'll be following as well. I've only read about the Soul Oracles from ancient texts. If their inheritance can really be found in the tomb, then it'll be worth going through the danger. Gong. Gongzi, your body. Alarmed, Jin Sohai hurriedly persuaded. He wasn't weak, and he was confident of protecting the Gongzi under most circumstances. However, the Soul Oracle Tomb was simply uncharted territories. It was a treacherous location even for him. Gongzi's cultivation was as good as null, and if they were to head there like that, he wasn't confident of ensuring the latter's safety. As the other party's subordinate, he didn't dare to take such risks. Don't worry. Even though my fighting prowess is lacking, I am more than capable of protecting myself. Zhao Feiwu chuckled lightly. Besides, isn't Zhang Shi here? I am eagerly waiting to see how he will wreak havoc in the Soul Oracle Tomb. But, hearing the other party's resolute voice, Jin Sohai was conflicted. However, he still gave in eventually. All right then, let's set off. Since everyone had already made up their minds, they climbed onto the back of the spirit beast without any hesitation. This mount was Zhao Feiwu's spirit beast, and it had a wide back. Even though more than a dozen people were riding on it, it wasn't cramped at all. Spreading its wings, it soared into the vast skies. Soul Oracle Tomb, here we come. Chapter 491. Coax Ridge. A spirit beast soared in the boundless skies. It was the 3rd day since Zhang Xian left Honghai City. The direction which the Soul Oracle Tomb was located at a direction opposite of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. The geographical terrain consisted of winding mountains reminiscent of a massive dragon lying the ground, ready to rise into the heavens at any moment. Within the room on the back of the spirit beast, Zhang Xian stood in front of the window with his eyes closed. In the past 3 days, he had reinforced his cultivation as a transcendent mortal one Dan pinnacle cultivator. At this moment, he was currently reorganizing the information he had collected on soul oracles in his mind. Back then, in order to accurately determine the identity of the soulless metal humanoid, Hall Master Sai had collected quite a few books on soul oracles. After duplicating those books from the appraiser hall, Zhang Xian hadn't been able to find time to browse through them. Since he had some free time now, he decided to make use of this opportunity to look through them. Compile! Muttering softly, the correct information recorded in the dozens of books in the Library of Heaven's Path gathered together to form a new book. All of the soul oracle-related books collected shared a common description on the occupation: mysterious and fearsome. Their deep knowledge concerning the subject of souls made them a fearsome existence. It didn't take long for Zhang Xian to read through the entire book, and he shook his head. The heritage of the occupation had been severed and there weren't many records left on it. The books remaining were incomprehensive and useful information was terribly limited. After browsing through the books, Zhang Xian was left with more doubts than he'd started with. Forget it, I'll just deal with whatever that comes my way. Knowing that there wasn't any useful information to be derived from the books, Zhang Xian sighed. Opening his eyes, he turned to Sun Chang, Zhao Ye and the others and said, All of you come here! Teacher! Young master! The group gathered around Zhang Xian. Seeing the grave expression on Zhang Xian's face, Zhao Feiwu asked, "Since Zhang Xian has some matters to delegate, should we step aside for a moment?" There were many secrets within a teacher-student lineage that outsiders shouldn't know of. Zhang Xian waved his hands. "There's no need for it, it isn't something major. I just want to remind them of some things that they have to take note of when we're at the Soul Oracle tomb." "Oh? Things to take note of? Then, can we listen in too?" Zhao Feiwu, Hall Master Sai, and the others' eyes lit up, and they hurriedly turned their attention over. Who was the young man before him? He was the master teacher who could even expel a soul oracle from a person's body. Not to mention, he was a 5-star appraiser and quasi-4-star formation master. How could the advice from such a person be anything ordinary? If they were to listen to his words, they would definitely have a much better chance at survival in the Soul Oracle tomb. "Of course, feel free." Ignoring the excited crowd, Zhang Xian turned to his students and subordinate and spoke gravely. "Take note of this. When we're at the Soul Oracle tomb, if anyone gets possessed, make sure not to devour the other party's soul carelessly. There are questions I would like to ask." If the soul that possessed Luo Zhu was still alive, Zhang Xian would surely be able to derive useful information from him. If so, there might be no need for him to take the risk and venture into the Soul Oracle tomb. The more he thought about it, the more regretful he felt about the matter. Thus, he made sure to instruct the others properly this time around. Otherwise, if this bunch of kids and Sun Chang were to rush to devour the soul oracles later on, it would be too late. "Yes." Zhao Ye and the others hurriedly nodded their heads. In order to protect them, their teacher had left a surge of Jinqi within each of them. Even if some soul oracle were to charge up to them, they would at least be able to avoid being possessed. That's more like it. Alright, that's all. You all should continue cultivating." After finishing his instructions, Zhang Xian waved his hands. Nodding, Zhao Ye and the others nodded and dispersed. Just like that? The others thought that Zhang Xian was going to conduct a detailed briefing, so they were filled with expectations. However, after hearing those words, the mouths of Zhao Feiwu, Hall Master Sai, and the others twitched. They nearly fainted on the spot. There was no one who wouldn't be filled with trepidation when heading toward a soul oracle tomb, fearful that something might catch them off guard. Yet this fellow made it seem as though he and his students were just going on a picnic. What in the world was with that official "allow me to have a bite first before you all devour your food" announcement? Cough, cough! Luo Zhu even choked on his saliva. For this trip to the Soul Oracle tomb, he had prepared many things. In fact, he had even written his will. And yet, the other party seemed to treat it like a leisure walk, and there wasn't the slightest worry in his attitude. Humans were truly born different. Suppressing his frustration, Luo Zhu glanced downward at the geographical terrain, did a rough calculation on their current location, and walked up to Zhang Xian. "Zhang Shi, we're about to arrive at the Soul Oracle tomb." Zhang Xian looked around and asked, "About to arrive? Where are we now?" "We're currently at the Myriad Kingdom Alliance's Nine Folds Mountain. 1,000 li of Nine Folds Mountain, 10,000 li of Red Ripple Sea. This is where the border with Mingxia Empire is located." Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up. There was a map on the Myriad Kingdom Alliance in the appraiser hall, and Zhang Xian had browsed through it. As such, he had a rough idea on the various landmarks across the empire. He had thought that the Soul Oracle tomb would be located in the middle of the alliance, so he was surprised to learn that they were at the border. Mingxia Empire was another empire of equivalent standing to the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. They were also one of the 27 powers participating in the Master Teacher Tournament. The Nine Folds Mountain was the boundary between the two powers, and battles broke out here often. As such, it was considered as one of the danger zones. "It isn't at the border yet, it is located at the third fold, Coax Ridge," Luo Zhu said. The Nine Folds Mountain consisted of a total of 9 folds. There was a more specific name for each fold, and Coax Ridge was located at the third fold. Legend had it that a powerful expert was once assaulted by a spirit beast stampede passing through the region. Thus, he calmly coaxed them and eventually, the spirit beasts decided to back off, thus came the name of the Coax Ridge. Spiritual energy was concentrated in this region, thus resulting in many spirit beasts and savage beasts roaming the area. Thus, even though it wasn't the border of the two empires, it was considered as one of the more dangerous locations. Most people would avoid coming here if possible. There are many spirit beasts on the Coax Ridge, so we can't fly over. Otherwise, there's a chance that we might be assaulted by aerial spirit beasts. Upon hearing the name of the location where they were headed to, Jin Sohai frowned. A transcendent mortal expert was still incapable of flight yet. As such, it could prove to be dangerous if they came under the assault of other aerial spirit beasts. After all, if they were to fall from the sky, at such a high altitude, they would most probably die immediately upon contact with the ground. Thus, very few people would dare to ride a flying mount through where aerial spirit beasts were numerous. Elder Jin is right. However, there's no need to worry. Since Gongzi's spirit beast has reached Transcendent Mortal 3 Dan Pinnacle, most spirit beasts wouldn't dare trifle with it. We should be able to fly straight to our destination. But of course, we can't land directly at the location itself. There's a formidable aerial spirit beast living in the vicinity of the Soul Oracle tomb. I'm afraid that we might incur its wrath if we were to approach carelessly. You mean that demon sink beast? Jin Sohai asked. Elder, you also know about this beast? Luo Zhu was taken aback. Of course I do. On top of its ability of flight, it has reached Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan Pinnacle, thus making it a fearsome existence. It has terrorized some of the neighboring villages and killed on numerous occasions. In order to deal with it, the Alliance has tried sending many experts to kill it several times, only to end in failure. With a grim expression, Jin Sohai continued. Furthermore, on top of its speed and strength, it is said to possess a dragon bloodline, thus granting it nearly invincible defense. As such, it's a troublesome adversary to deal with. Even the Beast Hall isn't able to do anything about it. You said that the Soul Oracle is near to its nest. May I know how far away it is? It is only several hundred meters away from its nest. The last time I came, I studied its habits and sneaked in while it was busy looking for food. There are more of us this time around, so it will be easier for us to get caught. Thus, I think we should proceed carefully. Luo Zhu said. Several hundred meters? That's a little too close. Jin Sohai frowned. At Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan Clarifying Turbidity Realm, one's soul would gain a certain level of autonomy from one's body. Under such a state, just by one's senses, one could easily perceive the happenings within a radius of several hundred meters around one. At such a distance, it was almost impossible for them to alarm the other party even if they were to proceed carefully. Even though Jin Sohai was a Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan expert as well, he was only at primary stage. On top of that, the Demon Sink Beast was an aerial spirit beast possessing a dragon bloodline. He wasn't a match for the other party at all. Even though he could resort to poison, he needed the other party to be unguarded first. Putting aside how the Demon Sink Beast was wary of humans, the dragon bloodline also provided it with an extremely high immunity to poison. If he were to fail to kill it in a single shot, he might incur the other party's fury and cause everyone's death. The Soul Oracle tomb was already dangerous by itself. To think that there would be such a ferocious fellow camping in the surroundings on top of that. After hesitating for a moment, Luo Zhu said, It is an extremely short distance, but after hiding in this region for 3 months, I managed to find some patterns in its behavior. As long as we proceed carefully, we shouldn't get noticed. Since you managed to find some patterns in its behavior, why don't we do it this way? After contemplating for a moment, Jin Sohai turned to Zhang Xian and asked, Zhang Shi, shall we stop 2 kilometers away from the Demon Sink's nest and slowly walk over? Unknowingly, Zhang Xian had become the de facto leader of the group. It had become a habit for them to look to him for answers. All right. Zhang Xian nodded. He had never been here before, and he didn't know about the Demon Sink Beast or how strong it was. Since the duo had already discussed it, he thought that it should be fine to go along with their decision. 2 kilometers wasn't much of a distance to cultivators of their capability. All right. Tell me when we're nearing the location. I'll have the tamed beast make a landing. Jin Sohai said. On. Luo Shu nodded. While the others were discussing, Sun Chang, upon seeing Hall Master Sai's face turn pale after hearing about the demon sink beast, couldn't hold himself back and asked, "Have you heard of that demon sink beast as well?" "Of course I've heard of it." Hall Master Sai smiled bitterly. "That fellow is incomparably strong. It's said that the head of the beast hall has once led 12 elders to encircle and subdue it, but the operation eventually ended in failure." 12 elders? That's right. Those who are qualified to become elders in the beast hall possess cultivation at least that of my level. Much can be said about the strength of the demon sink beast given how they failed despite mobilizing so many experts. Hall Master Sai shook his head. Not only is that fellow capable of flight, due to its dragon bloodline, it possesses incredible defense as well. Even spirit intermediate tier weapons could do no harm to it. On top of that, it has a violent temper, and it is extremely territorial. If it is really guarding that area, it won't be easy for us to approach. Are you afraid? Interrupting the other party's words, Sun Chang uttered in disdain. If you are scared, you might as well leave right now. To think that you're still the head of the appraiser hall. Me. Afraid? Seeing the other party's expression, Hall Master Sai nearly fainted. To think that a transcendent mortal 4-dan expert like him would be looked down on and mocked by an insignificant butler. Infuriated, he was just about to lash out when Luo Zhu's voice echoed. We're here. After which, the aerial spirit beast began on its descent, headed straight for the winding mountain range. Chapter 492. Someone is here. Jumping off the back of the spirit beast, Zhang Xian took in a deep breath and immediately felt the dense spiritual energy in the surroundings. The concentration of spiritual energy here was indeed much higher than anywhere else. It's nearly twofold, Zhang Xian evaluated. It was no wonder why Jin Sohai and Luo Zhu said that there were many spirit beasts here. With such dense spiritual energy, one's rate of cultivation would definitely be fast. Under such circumstances, it wasn't surprising for spirit beasts to be attracted to the region. Regardless of whether it was a spirit beast or savage beast, just like humans, they preferred areas with high concentration of spiritual energy. Activating the Eye of Insight, Zhang Xian surveyed the surroundings. As expected, he saw the traces of many savage beasts and spirit beasts. Why are there so many footprints? Suddenly, Zhang Xian's eyes fell on a particular spot. No too far away, on top of the claw prints of spirit beasts, he noticed some human footprints as well. There were nearly 10 of such trails, and judging from the moisture of the surrounding ground, those footprints seemed to be freshly made. Someone has just walked by here. Could they know about the Soul Oracle tomb as well? Seeing those footprints, Jin Songhai's eyebrows knitted together. A radius of 2 kilometers was about the limit of the demon sink beast's perception. Before such danger, one should be eager to escape as far as possible. Why would anyone walk in to court their deaths? Unless there was a greater profit driving them. In other words, there was a good chance that someone knew about the existence of the Soul Oracle tomb as well. This ancient occupation might be mysterious and feared, but it was still a trove of knowledge and power. Many experts would definitely rush in if they were to learn of the location of the tomb. It was just like how the auction of the soulless metal humanoid managed to attract the attention of so many powers. Impossible! The location of the Soul Oracle tomb is deeply hidden. Even I had to spend a very long time searching before finding it despite possessing some hints on its location. Besides, when I left the tomb, I sealed tightly and concealed it. Luo Zhu shook his head. The inheritance of the Soul Oracles had been severed since ancient times. The only reason why he could find the Soul Oracle tomb was due to some information he retrieved from another ancient tomb. The seniors of the ancient tomb's owner had participated in the building of the Soul Oracle tomb, and they had left behind some hints on its location inside. It took him great effort to decipher the clues to pinpoint the Soul Oracle tomb to this area. He didn't think that there would be another person who would be as lucky as him. Then those footprints? Jin Sohai questioned doubtfully. I have no idea either. Even though he was certain that the location of the Soul Oracle tomb wouldn't be exposed, he couldn't help but feel slightly worried by those fresh footprints. Are these footprints pointed toward the direction of the Soul Oracle tomb? Zhang Xian asked. After calculating the direction for a moment, Luo Zhu replied. That's right. There's no point thinking about it here. Let's go up and take a look. Zhang Xian waved his hands. There was no point getting distressed over the matter here. If someone had really beaten them to it, they might as well just go forward to take a look. It would be best if they could share some information regarding the Soul Oracle tomb, and if not, he would find some way to deal with it then. Besides, these footprints did not necessarily mean that those people were headed for the Soul Oracle tomb. On! Everyone nodded, and the group proceeded forward. The number of footprints are increasing. The further they advanced, the more footprints that appeared. It seemed like quite a substantial group was gathered here. Analyzing the footprints, Jin Sohai said, These footprints are extremely light, and the distance between every single footprint is almost identical. This means that those people possess a powerful control over the environment. From this, we can conclude the ones who left the footsteps behind were mostly transcendent mortal 2 Dan or 3 Dan experts. As a poison master, he was often pursued by his enemies. Thus, in order to protect himself, he had specially studied tracking skills, granting him exceptional acuity in his assessment towards such matters. On! Zhang Xian nodded. Zhang Xian had never studied books regarding tracking, but based on the feedback from the Eye of Insight, he came to the same conclusion as well. Knowing that the other party was a large group of experts, Jin Songhai's face turned grim. As he advanced forward, he sent a telepathic message to Zhao Feiwu. Gongzi, if there is any danger, summon the tamed beast immediately and leave along with the rest. Zhao Feiwu turned to him and asked, What about you? Even though my fighting prowess isn't top-notch in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, I still do possess some life-preserving skills. If I have to take care of the rest of you while in danger, none of us will survive. Jin Sohai said. As a poison master, it wouldn't be easy to kill him. The one thing that poison masters didn't fear at all was encirclement. All right. Seeing that the other party had already made up his mind, Zhao Feiwu nodded. Even though plundering was rare under the influence of the Master-Teacher Pavilion, it didn't mean that it didn't happen at all. If they were to come under attack in the wilderness, there would be no one to redress their grievances. Even if she was the princess of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, considering how difficult it would be to trace down the culprits, it was unlikely that the enemies would give them any slack. You all be careful as well. Zhang Xian turned to instruct Zhao Ye and the others as well before walking in front of them. Even if he were to meet with danger, with the Eye of Insight, Library of Heaven's Path, and Heaven's Path movement art, he was still able to take care of himself. However, his students had just achieved a breakthrough not too long ago, and they had yet to reach transcendent mortal realm as well. Thus, they might be unable to cope. Yes. Seeing their teachers back in front of them, Zhao Ye and the others found their anxiety disappearing. Their teacher's silhouette felt like a reliable mountain to them. Regardless of where they were, as long as their teacher was with them, they felt as though there was nothing that they couldn't overcome. After carefully advancing forward for around 1 kilometer, the group passed a ridge and saw a valley before them. The valley was extremely deep, and they couldn't see the end at a single glance. It was filled with all kinds of trees and plants, and due to the high concentration of spiritual energy, they were exceptionally lush. At this point, the footprints from before disappeared as well. Luo Zhu walked forward and said, Zhang Shi, the Soul Oracle tomb is within the valley. On! Zhang Xian nodded his head. He was just about to instruct the group to be careful when voila, a few figures appeared from the bushes and blocked the advance of the group. Identify yourselves! Hostility could be heard the other party's deep voice. Zhang Xian glanced at the few figures before him. There was a total of 6 men, and all of them were in their 30s. Vaguely, one could sense an aura no weaker than a transcendent mortal 2 Dan from them. The strongest of them, a gray-robed man, had even reached Transcendent Mortal 3 Dan, Yin Yang realm. With this kind of strength, he was on par even with that 4-star master teacher Zhang Xian met before Song Chao. Who are you all? Stepping forward, Jin Sohai revealed his cultivation. What do you all intend to do by hiding here? Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan? Upon feeling the immense strength Jin Sohai was exerting, the faces of the men paled. They glanced at one another, and eventually, the gray-robed man said, Elder, our elders are currently doing something inside and they mustn't be interrupted now. I beseech you all to take a detour instead. Detour? Frowning, Jin Songhai's face darkened. We have matters to attend inside as well. I ask of you to give way. Elder, do you intend to barge through? Seeing that the other party had no intention to give in, the men's complexion turned awful. Walala! Crisp sounds echoed in the air as they drew their swords. Even though they were only Transcendent Mortal 2 Dan and 3 Dan cultivators, they had no intention of stepping back either. Ha! Even if I do intend to barge through, do you all think you can stop me? With a powerful and authoritative disposition, Jin Sohai stepped forward. Chapter 493, Hall Master of the Beast Hall. I have to try even if I can't. The gray-robed man didn't retreat. Instead, he stepped forward and beckoned for the others. Then, all of a sudden, with a light metallic buzz, the few men charged forward simultaneously, and their weapons formed a net of swords headed straight toward Jin Sohai. Their cultivation was far inferior to Jin Sohai, but the powerful sword chi they were emitting felt indomitable. A collaborative formation? Jin Sohai frowned. The movements of these men were complementing one another via the usage of a battle formation. Furthermore, from the looks of it, the formation didn't seem to be weak at all. Even with Jin Songhai's superior cultivation realm, he would probably be in for a difficult fight. The main function of this kind of collaborative formation was to amplify the strength of a group to match up to a cultivator far stronger than them. It was just like how Zhao Ye, Yuan Tao, and the others were not a match for Lu Sun individually back then, but through the use of a collaborative formation, they still managed to subdue the latter. Of the 6 men, the strongest person, the gray-robed man, was only a Transcendent Mortal 3 Dan and the rest were all Transcendent Mortal 2 Dan. However, through the use of a formation, they could display strength several folds higher. A wave of sword chi gushed straight at Jin Songhai. Even when their opponent was a Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan expert, they were still able to stand their ground. Humph! Without the slightest fluster, Jin Sohai stomped his feet on the ground and charged forward. Jinchi gushed into his fingers as he compressed the surrounding air, deflecting the sword chi that were rushing at him. This was the first time Zhang Xian had seen a Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan expert fighting at his full strength, and the battle was way beyond his expectations. Every single one of Jin Songhai's moves seemed to carry a unique order. His blows were heavy at a moment, light in the next, and the air in the surroundings seemed to move to complement his movements. Even though the other party's formation was profound and formidable, it wouldn't be easy for them to hurt him. However, he was restricted by the 6 swords. It would be difficult for him to break out of it within a short period of time. Admittedly, if he were to resort to his poison, he could subdue the other party immediately. However, there wasn't an irreconcilable grudge between him and those men. Also, they weren't worthy of having him reveal his hand as well. Pung pung pung. Both sides clashed furiously with one another, but the shock wave was only confined to an area of several dozen meters. This revealed the precise control they had over their strength. Let me help you! Seeing that it would be impossible for the fight to end in the short run, Hall Master Sai was fearful that if they were to be stalled here for too long, the demon sink beast might be alarmed. Thus, bellowing deeply, he stepped into the battle as well. His fighting prowess wasn't inferior to Jin Sohai in the least. With his entry, the collaborative sword formation immediately fell apart, and the 6 young men were jolted backward. After several collisions, their swords were knocked away and they fell into a weak state. Given their cultivation realm, it was impossible for them to face 2 4 Dan experts simultaneously. All right. Seeing that the 6 men were on the verge of defeat, Hall Master Sai and Jin Sohai prepared to advance forward to deal the final blow when Zhang Xian suddenly shook his hands. "That's enough, we're all on the same side." Hearing those words, everyone was taken aback. Could it be that Zhang sure knew the other party? On the same side? The gray-robed man was perplexed, and he looked at Zhang Xian with a bewildered glance. "I am Beast Tamer Zhang Xian." Ignoring the other party's attitude, Zhang Xian stepped forward, flicked his wrist, and took out a Beast Tamer emblem. "If I'm not wrong, all of you are Beast Tamers as well, right?" Upon seeing the emblem, the few men immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Flicking their wrists as well, they took out their emblems. Just as Zhang Xian had said, they were all Beast Tamers. Frowning, Hall Master Sai asked, "You're all from the Beast Hall?" Probably only the Beast Hall had the capability to dispatch 6 Beast Tamers of such strength simultaneously. "Yes." The gray-robed man nodded. "I am Sai Xiaoyu from the Appraiser Hall. May I know if your Hall Master is Han Chong or Luo Ming?" Hall Master Sai asked. "It's Hall Master Han Chong." Sai Xiaoyu. It's Hall Master Sai. Pardon me for my discourtesy." Hearing the name, the gray-robed man was taken aback for a moment before a figure appeared in his head and he immediately jolted in fear. He hurriedly clasped his fist and apologized. There were 2 Beast Hall branches in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, and their Hall Masters were Han Chong and Luo Ming respectively. On the other hand, there was only one Appraiser Hall, and it was located in Hahai City. Even though the cultivation of this Hall Master Sai might be inferior to their Hall Master, due to the vast connections of the Appraiser Hall, they were both of equal standing. Given that the other party was of equivalent standing to their Hall Master, it wasn't a big deal to lose to him. So you're old Han's men." "I am old buddies with your Hall Master Han." Upon knowing the background of the few men before him, Hall Master Sai nodded his head. Then, with slight doubt in his eyes, he asked, "Your Beast Hall branch should be in the vicinity of the Myriad Kingdom City. What are you all doing here?" The Beast Hall branch which Han Chong was the Hall Master of was located in the mountains near Myriad Kingdom City. The 9-fold mountains were several 100,000 kilometers away from their base. What could they be doing here? "Reporting to Hall Master Sai, our Hall Master is currently in the midst of taming the demon Sink Beast." Knowing that the other party was an old buddy of their Hall Master, the gray-robed man decided not to hide the matter. "Taming the demon Sink Beast? Didn't your Hall Master attempt it 3 years ago but it ended in failure?" Hall Master Sai was perplexed. The one who led the 12 elders to surround the demon Sink 3 years ago, but ended in failure was exactly this Hall Master Han Chong. Could it be that the other party was unwilling to give up and came here to attempt it once more? "Ever since the failure 3 years ago, our Hall Master has been coming here whenever he finds time to interact with the demon Sink Beast. After such a long period of time of companionship, their relationship has grown rather intimate. Thus, he intends to give it his all to tame it today. In order to prevent anyone who interrupting him, he ordered us to guard this area and prevent any savage beasts or strangers in," the gray-robed man replied. Hall Master Sai nodded his head. Zhang Xian also finally understood the situation. Unlike Zhang Xian, ordinary beast tamers didn't possess Heaven's Path Jinqi, and they couldn't use it as a bait to convince a savage beast to submit to them. Thus, they could only rely on the fellowship built over a long period of time and win its goodwill to tame it. Back then, when Mou tamed the viridescent eagle, she also used all kinds of treasure to attract it before winning its goodwill. Given Hall Master Han Chong's ability, 3 years was probably more than sufficient for him to earn great intimacy with the demon Sink Beast. Thus, gauging that it was about time, he decided to tame it in a single go. Hearing that his old buddy was currently trying to tame Spirit Beast whose notoriety was known in the entirety of the Alliance, Hall Master Sai hesitated for a moment before asking, "Can we go over to take a look? If he were to meet with trouble, we may be able to offer some assistance." Beast taming was by no means an easy task. It wasn't too much if one could tame it, but failure could potentially unleash the wrath of the Spirit Beast onto one. It was said that in the battle 3 years ago, Hall Master Chong was so severely injured that he had to recuperate on the bed for more than a month. "Ah. All right. After a moment of contemplation, the gray-robed man finally nodded his head. However, you all must be careful as well. The demon sink beast is arrogant and violent. Make sure not to incur its ire. Given Hall Master Sai's esteemed standing, they were clearly not in the position to stop the other party. In any case, the beast taming hadn't started yet, and the Hall Master and the other elders were still in the midst of the preparatory phase. Thus, the latter probably wouldn't blame him if he were to bring some men in. Rest assured, I am an old buddy of your Hall Master. I won't interfere in his affairs. Hall Master Sai smiled. It was beneath the dignity of an expert of Hall Master Sai's caliber to lie. Thus, the grey-robe nodded his head before turning to the other men and instructing. The rest of you shall remain guard here. Don't allow any savage beasts or strangers to pass through. After which, he gestured forward and said, Hall Master Sai, this way please. The group followed along. A short distance later, the lush mountain forest suddenly opened up. A waterfall flowed down from the mountain cliff, forming a lake of several hundred meters wide. Not too far from the lake, an immense cavern could be seen. Outside the cavern stood a few elder, and they seemed to be waiting for something. Upon hearing the footsteps, they turned around, and the elder standing at the direct center was just about to lash out when he caught sight of Hall Master Sai within the crowd and his eyes lit up. Hall Master Sai, why are you here? I just happened to be passing by. I was looking for some items when I was stopped by your men. From them, I learned that you intend to attempt taming the demon sink beast once more. Thus, I decided to come over to take a look, Hall Master Sai said. The other party was the Hall Master of the Myriad Kingdom City Beast Hall, Han Chong. You also know of my condition. The competition between the two beast halls in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance is intense, and only one of the Hall Masters will obtain the opportunity to study at Huanyu Empire. If I don't tame a spirit beast that towered over the others, there's no guarantee I will get the slot. Hall Master Han Chong smiled bitterly. The two beast halls in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance had always been competing with one another. For the opportunity to study at a higher-tiered beast hall, the two hall masters had been clashing with one another both in the shadows and in the open for several years already. There was nothing that could prove a beast tamer's capability more than taming a powerful spirit beast. Thus, for the past 3 years, Hall Master Han had been trying to tame this demon sink beast to take the lead. That's true. I heard that you've been trying to get close with it for the past 3 years. How is the progress? Hall Master Sai asked. There isn't much of a difference from before. The demon sink beast possesses the dragon bloodline, thus giving rise to its arrogant and solitary personality. If it could be tamed that easily, I wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. If not for Huanyu Empire's envoy coming in a few days' time, I wouldn't be in such a rush as to thrash it out today. Hall Master Han shook his head. For a spirit beast of this tier, 3 years was still a little too short. However, Hall Master Han had no other choice. The envoy was about to arrive soon, and if he couldn't tame this fellow before then, he would be at a disadvantageous position as compared to Hall Master Han Ming. And if he were to fail the selections, it would be impossible for him to become a 5-star beast tamer in his lifetime. Then the reason why you all are waiting here is, since they had decided they were going to tame the demon sink beast, then where was the star of the show? Why would they be gathering here instead of looking for the demon sink beast? It's inside the cavern now. That fellow usually only heads out to hunt during noon. It's still a little too early, so it's still sleeping. Hall Master Han gestured to the cavern. Ah. Hall Master Sai nodded his head. These are your juniors? After which, Hall Master Han turned to Zhang Xian and the others and asked doubtfully. Cough, cough. Upon hearing the other party ask if Zhang Shi was his junior, Hall Master Sai immediately jolted in fear. He quickly tried to clarify the matter, but Zhang Xian beat him to it. I am Zhang Xian, Hall Master Sai's friend. Friend? Hall Master Han was taken aback. As a 4-star appraiser, Hall Master Sai's standing wasn't beneath his in any way. Why would he become a friend with a lad who wasn't even 20 yet? Perplexed, Hall Master Han asked, May I know what Brother Zhang's occupation is? Reporting to the Hall Master, He's a 2-star beast tamer. I saw his emblem just a moment ago. Before Zhang Xian could reply, the gray-robed man by the side interjected. 2-star beast tamer? Hall Master Han's bizarre expression deepened. There were many of beast tamers of such level in the Beast Hall. When did Hall Master Sai fall so low as to become friends with such a person? Chapter 494 Snatching. So, little brother is a beast tamer as well. To be able to reach 2-star at such a young age, the younger generation sure is impressive. Even though Hall Master Han was perplexed, he didn't allow his true thoughts to slip through. Clasping his hands, he spoke politely before turning his attention away. A 2-star beast tamer under 20 was impressive, but in their beast hall, it wasn't a particularly rare sight. Hearing the other party's perfunctory words, Zhang Xian couldn't be bothered to explain himself. His aim here was the Soul Oracle tomb. It didn't matter to him whether the other party viewed him highly or not. It would suffice as long as the other party didn't interfere in his affairs. Hall Master Han Zhang. Seeing the attitude of his old buddy, Hall Master Sai immediately realized that the other party might be misunderstanding something. He immediately spoke up to explain the matter when the ground before them suddenly tremored and a loud voice echoed. Roar! A loud howl reminiscent of thunder boomed, and the leaves from the nearby withered trees immediately fell to the ground. Impressive! Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up. Just the voice in itself was sufficient to jolt a cultivator beneath Zongsha realm to death. For a single roar to be so incredible, as expected of a famous spirit beast in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. It was indeed a fearsome existence. It's awake, let's begin! Hall Master Han's eyes lit up. He immediately turned around to instruct the elders. Upon hearing the instructions, the elders nodded and stepped forward. One of them flicked their wrist. Boom! The massive corpse of a spirit beast appeared on the ground. The corpse of a transcendent mortal too, Dan, dear horde beast. You all even managed to hunt down one of those. Upon seeing the corpse, Zhao Feiwu's eyebrows leaped and a look of disbelief surfaced on her face. This spirit beast is incredible? Sun Chang asked doubtfully. The deer horde beast is only a transcendent mortal 2-dan spirit beast, and it isn't particularly strong. However, it possesses extraordinary speed. Its meat is fresh and juicy, making it a favored prey among spirit beasts and cultivators. Unfortunately, their numbers are severely limited and there might not be a single one across the entire Ninefolds Mountain. It must have surely cost a lot of time and effort to capture one. Due to her illness, Zhao Feiwu wasn't able to move around freely. Thus, she devoted her time to books. Given the unique nature of the deer-horde beast, she remembered it clearly. Hearing the conversation of the two, the gray-robed man proudly explained. Looks like you know quite a bit. This deer-horde beast took 17 beast tamers over a course of half a year to hunt. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this is the only hunted deer-horde beast within the entire Myriad Kingdom Alliance at the moment. It'll be impossible to find a second one on the market. Even though the cultivation of deer-horde beast wasn't too high, it possessed high wariness, and it was exceptionally cunning. If not for so many beast tamers being dispatched for it, it would surely be impossible to capture it. Even though the other party was being narcissistic, Zhao Feiwu knew that there wasn't any mistake in saying so. It was indeed extremely difficult to capture this beast. Back then, a prince of the Alliance, the household of the Alliance head, was ill and required the heart of the deer-horde beast for treatment. Thus, the Alliance head residents offered a high monetary reward for the acquirement of this spirit beast, but there was no result for 5 whole years. Eventually, due to the lack of medicine, the prince's physical condition deteriorated and he eventually died. It was also because of this that she flipped through the books and learned of the deer-horde beast. Not only is the flesh of the deer-horse beast fresh and juicy, more importantly, this spirit beast feeds on spirit herbs. Despite its weak cultivation, it is overflowing with spiritual energy, making it no different from a tonic. If a spirit beast were to consume it, they would be able to easily overcome their current bottleneck and reach higher realms. Hall Master Sai interjected. In other words, it's a mobile realm breakthrough pill. I see. So, they are intending to use the corpse of this fellow to please the demon sink beast. Coming to an understanding, Sun Quan was astonished. To think that they would even procure such a rare and difficult-to-hunt spirit beast to tame this demon sink beast. The hall master of the beast hall had truly gone all out this time. While they were discussing this matter, Hall Master Han took in a deep breath and stepped forward. Brother Demon Sink, I've prepared the items I told you about already. They are right here, come out and take a look. The voice echoed into the cave. There was a moment of silence, and the atmosphere grew tenser by the moment. Just as everyone was about to reach their limit, a loud gust of the wind blew out from within and a gigantic figure flew out. It was a massive spirit beast possessing a height of around 7 to 8 meters. When its wings were spread apart, its length reached more than 30 meters long. Its eyes were scarlet as though fresh blood, giving it a fearsome appearance. At the same time, its body is filled with resilient-looking scales, reflecting its outstanding defensive capability. The transcendent Mortal 4 Dan pinnacle aerial spirit beast that everyone within the Myriad Kingdom Alliance feared. The Demon Sink. Roar! As though having comprehended the words of Hall Master Han, the massive savage beast looked at the Dehorde beast corpse placed in front of him with fiery eyes. Spirit beasts were already capable of absorbing spiritual energy to cultivate, and they possessed intelligence not beneath that of a human. The corpse of this Dehorde beast was producing the deep fragrance of herbs and an intense spiritual energy disturbance. At this moment, its instincts were telling it that if it were to consume it, its cultivation would surely soar. Even if it wasn't able to reach Transcendent Mortal 5 Dan, it wouldn't be too far from it then. Under such circumstances, how could it not feel agitated? Brother Demon Sink, as long as you promise to a condition of mine, this Dehorde beast will be yours. Seeing that its interest was piqued, Hall Master Han chuckled lightly. Roar! The Demon Sink beast turned its head to Hall Master Han, as though indicating its willingness to listen to the conditions of the latter. For the past 3 years, Brother Demon Sink and I have been spending much time together, and I believe you should have a clear understanding of what kind of person I am. My condition is simple. I hope that you can become my tamed beast, Hall Master Han said. Don't worry, we can sign an equal contract. This way, I won't be able to force you to do anything you are reluctant to. Roar! Hearing that it had to become a tamed beast, the Demon Sink beast's face immediately warped in savagery, and it roared in displeasure. It emanated a deep aura of hostility that left one's hair standing on ends. It seemed to be saying that if Hall Master Han dared to continue talking about the matter, it would surely make a move. As a bearer of the dragon bloodline, it was of esteemed standing. How could it possibly be willing to submit to a mere human and serve as its lackey? You shouldn't be in such a hurry to make your decision. Seeing how the other party refused him without the slightest hesitation, Hall Master Han's complexion turned awful. However, he quickly veiled it and chuckled. I believe you should know of my standing among the humans. I am the head of the Beast Hall, a figure respected by many. Brother Demon Sink, as long as you follow me, I will treat you as my peer and fulfill anything you ask of to the best of my ability. The lifespan of spirit beasts might be long, but how long does it take for you to raise your cultivation by absorbing spiritual energy from the surroundings? You will be entitled to much better resources if you were to follow me. After finishing those words, Hall Master Han beckoned to the elders behind. A few elders stepped forward and a bunch of spirit stones appeared on the floor. They were all low-tier spirit stones, but they stacked up into a mini mountain. There was at least several thousand of them, and their appearance immediately caused the spiritual energy in the surroundings to surge. Just by taking a whiff, one could feel their pores opening up and an indescribable feeling of comfort would envelop one. Humans weren't the only one who could utilize spirit stones for their cultivation. Spirit beasts were the same as well. Cultivating through absorbing spiritual energy from spirit stones would surely be much faster than simply absorbing spiritual energy from the surroundings. There's a total of 8,000 spirit stones here. As long as you agree to the condition, I can give them all to you right now, Hall Master Han said. The reason why he could take out so many spirit stones while Hall Master Sai wasn't able to was not because the latter was poor. Rather, Hall Master Sai had spent the bulk of his money on collectibles, resulting in the amount of spirit stones he could take out at a moment to be severely limited. In terms of total assets, the latter would surely be far superior. It was just like those antique collectors in the world Zhang Xian lived in prior to his transcension. If those collectors were to sell their entire collection, they would surely be drowning in cash. However, as finding a suitable buyer for these items were difficult, the amount of cash they could take out at a given time might not compare up to some of the wealthier merchants. If you aren't interested in these spirit stones, you might be interested in this. Seeing the lack of response from the demon sink beast after taking out the bunch of spirit stones, Hall Master Han hesitated for a moment before gritting his teeth. Flicking his wrist, he took out a jade box. Slowly opening it, a spirit stone came into sight. Boom! The moment the box was opened, the spiritual energy in the surroundings immediately grew so dense that it was nearly tangible. It felt as though as long as one was holding onto the spirit stone, even if one didn't attempt to absorb it, the spiritual energy would still seep into one's body, enhancing one's body. To put it simply, if one were to place this spirit stone by the side of an infant, even if the latter didn't cultivate, nourished by the spiritual energy contained within it, his body would become incredibly powerful, and it would be immune to common illnesses. In less than 2 months, its physical body would become no weaker than that of a Piga realm cultivator. Could this be a middle-tier spirit stone? Zhang Xian clenched his fists tightly in agitation. Having read innumerable books, he knew a thing about two on the various tiers of spirit stones. The spirit stones in his possession at the moment were of the most inferior grade, low-tier spirit stones. Low-tier spirit stones were sufficient to support the cultivation of a cultivator of transcendent mortal 4 Dan and below. Any higher than that would require spirit stones of higher grade. Taking Zhang Xian for example, due to the incredible purity of Heaven's Path Xinqi, even though he was only at transcendent mortal 1 Dan prolonged longevity realm pinnacle, low-tier spirit stones were already nearly ineffective on his cultivation. If he wanted to reach origin energy realm, on top of completing the Heaven's Path divine art of that level, more importantly, he needed a middle-tier spirit stone. That spirit stone in Hall Master Han's hand was more than sufficient for his cultivation to rise from prolonged longevity realm pinnacle to origin energy realm pinnacle. While quantity could make up for the disparity in quality, this logic only applied if the disparity in quality wasn't too great in the first place. With sufficient straw, one might be able to buy a diamond. However, the properties of a straw could never achieve the properties of a diamond. Thus, even though 10,000 low-tier spirit stones could be exchanged for a middle-tier spirit stone, it couldn't replace the effectiveness of a single middle-tier spirit stone. That's right, it is a middle-tier spirit stone! Not expecting his old buddy to take out such an invaluable object, Hall Master Sai's eyes widened in shock. Middle-tier spirit stones were incomparably expensive. There wasn't more than a handful of it throughout the entire Myriad Kingdom Alliance. The value of it could only be greater than the Deerhorde beast. Roar! Seeing the middle-tier spirit stone, the eyes of the demon sink beast grew even redder. In truth, Hall Master Han's heart was also bleeding from taking out his greatest treasure. However, he knew that it would be impossible to hook in the demon sink beast without this much. Thus, clenching his jaws, he continued, "As long as Brother Demon Sink agrees to becoming my tamed beast, this middle-tier spirit stone will be yours." "HM? Brother Demon Sink, what are you intending to do?" Before he could finish his words, the demon sink beast flapped in massive wings and charged forward. Its talons swooped forward swiftly amidst raging winds to grab the spirit stone in Hall Master Han's hand. Snatching? The heck! Chapter 495. Fearmongering. Hall Master Han felt dismal. Over the past 3 years, regardless of what the other party wished for, he had definitely given his all to procuring it just to please the other party. All he wished was to earn the other party's gratitude so that the other party would consider their relationship when he tried to tame it. Yet this fellow forgot about their relationship as soon as a treasure appeared, and even went to the extent of snatching it. The heck! Could he be any greedier than this? If only he knew that the other party was so ungrateful, he would have never gone through so much trouble. Activate the formation! Judging from how the other party was ferociously charging at him, it probably didn't have any intention of stopping until it laid its claws on the middle tier spirit stone. Knowing that this wasn't the time to get depressed, Hall Master Han bellowed. Since the carrot didn't work, he could only utilize his final resort, forcing the other party to submit through violence. This was the least preferable method due to the overwhelming strength of the demon sink beast. Even though the beast Hall had the numerical advantage, capturing it alive was a terribly difficult task. If not for such, Hall Master Han wouldn't have wasted his 3 years pleasing the other party. While he was confident that he could convince the other party to submit through 3 years of relationship and the allure of profits, he still made preparations for the worst possible scenario. He had set up a formation here in advance in case something went wrong. To think that he would really end up using it. Yes! Nodding their heads, the elders dashed off in 4 different directions, and driving the Jinchi in their body to the maximum, they grabbed at the air before them. Boom! At a distance several hundred meters in front of the crowd, a mist slowly drifted into appearance, catching the demon sink beast off guard. In its short moment of hesitation, the mist completely surrounded it. It's a confinement formation! Having learned the Heaven's Path formation art, even without utilizing the Library of Heaven's Path, Zhang Xian's comprehension of formations was comparable to a 4-star pinnacle formation master. Iron Chain Confinement Formation! Recognizing it, Jin Songhai's eyes narrowed. That's right! Zhang Xian nodded in agreement. Iron Chain Confinement Formation was a formation created by a 4-star pinnacle formation master more than 1,000 years ago. It made use of the violent spiritual energy in the natural surroundings to form overlapping iron chains that bound lifeforms trapped within its area of effect. Even struggling free of the chains was a huge hurdle, needless to say, escaping from the formation. A Grade 4 Pinnacle Confinement Formation. Staring at the impressive formation before him, Zhang Xian remarked. It seems like Hall Master Han is truly determined to capture this fellow. A formation of this level couldn't be set up on a whim. A formation master had to study the geographical terrain in advance to determine the various hiding spots for the formation flag. Afterward, he had to hide the formation flags underground without leaving the slightest trace so as to not incur the suspicion of the demon sink beast. Even for a 4-star pinnacle formation master, it was impossible to achieve this without several months of preparation. Indeed. If I'm not mistaken, in the past 3 years, on top of pleasing this large fellow, he has made a lot of various preparations beneath the surface as well. Hall Master Sai smiled bitterly. Given the duration of time required to set up the formation and that the assistance of a 4-star pinnacle formation master was required, it seemed like his old buddy was determined to make this operation a success. It was probably after he suffered a setback 3 years ago that he thought of this idea. On the surface, he did his best to please the demon sink beast, but in the shadows, he secretly hired others to set up this formation in case things didn't go as planned. Zhang Xian shrugged. It's perfectly normal for him to do this. A beast tamer must always consider the possibility of failure. If he couldn't do this much, he couldn't have possibly become a 4-star beast tamer. Not even high-rank beast tamers could guarantee their taming to be successful every single time, especially when dealing with a ferocious and proud spirit beast. Hall Master Han had already failed once. If he were to confront the demon sink beast without sufficient preparation in hopes of taming it, he wouldn't be worthy of his position as the head of the Beast Hall, a 4-star pinnacle beast tamer. Roar! While the group was chatting, the trapped demon sink beast realized that he had fallen for the other party's ploy and it howled furiously. It went on a rampage and destructive force shook the surroundings. It's futile! Hall Master Han harumphed as he walked forward. With a flick of his wrist, a screen appeared in front of his crowd, reflecting the current circumstance of the demon sink beast. At Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan, its Jinchi had already evolved into origin energy, allowing it to utilize unimaginable means. This screen was similar to the wall in the corridor housing the sea of formations in the Formation Master Guild, allowing one to clearly view the situation within the formation, as well as serving as a platform to communicate with the prisoner inside. The thick chains created through immense quantity of spiritual energy locked the demon sink beast firmly in place. The feared demon sink beast thrashed around violently, trying to free itself from its confines, but to no avail. "I've already told you, it's futile! I advise you not to waste your strength." Hearing its frenzied howl, Hall Master Han chuckled lightly. "Roar!" Hearing those words, the rage of the demon sink beast crescendoed. 3 years of fellowship had made it lower its wariness toward the other party. Otherwise, how could it possibly overlook a formation that was set up at the entrance of its nest? It didn't expect this to put it into a perilous situation. Resentment gushed through its mind like a huge torrent, and if looks could kill, Hall Master Han would have been torn into countless shreds by now. "This is a grade 4 pinnacle formation. You might be powerful, but it'll be impossible for you to escape without knowing the correct method. Why don't we continue our previous conversation? As long as you promise to become my tamed beast, everything I've promised you before still holds. If not, I believe you should be more than aware of your current circumstances. It might be a pity to kill you, but you're no use to me otherwise," Hall Master Han said. In truth, he didn't want to come to this step. Even if he were to successfully tame the demon sink beast after this, it would be impossible for him to win the heart of the latter. That would be equivalent to a potential threat hanging over his neck. But the other party simply refused to submit to him, even going to the extent of snatching his item. Left with no choice, he could only resort to this. Roar! Seething with anger, the demon sink beast glared at Hall Master Han with its massive eyes. "You need not give me your answer so quickly. I have the time to wait for you." Seeing its attitude, Hall Master Han shook his head. Even so, he wasn't anxious in the least. Since the other party was already trapped, at the very most, he just had to expend more spirit stones to sustain the formation. No matter what, Hall Master Han was determined to tame the other party. Even though he had threatened to kill the other party, that was more of a mean to coerce the other party into submission. After all, once the other party was killed, his 3 years of effort would have gone in vain. Infuriated, the demon sink beast struggled. However, it wasn't able to struggle free of the iron chains which bound it tightly. Eventually, realizing that it couldn't free itself of its confines like that, it lay down and slowly closed his eyes. "Hall Master, what do we do?" Seeing that the huge fellow had calmed down instead, the other elders stared at one another in confusion before walking up to Hall Master Han. "What else can we do other than wait? Elder Hu, take out the deer horse beast and roast it. Make sure that the aroma reaches the demon sink beast. I don't believe that gluttonous fellow can hold himself back when such delicacy is placed before him," Hall Master Han said. Even when raw, the deer horde beast carried the deep aroma of herbs. Roasting it would surely whet one's appetite. As an embodiment of gluttony, it would be a wonder if the demon sink beast could hold itself back. Honestly speaking, Hall Master Han's mastery in the art of beast taming was truly formidable. The aroma of the deer horde beast was a clear contrast of the demon sink beast's current plight, and the other possibility if it were to give in. This would surely gnaw at the other party's determination, luring it into submission. An ordinary spirit beast would have surely given in at this point. "Yes." Elder Hu nodded. Just as he was about to start the fire to roast the deer horde beast, the 2-star beast tamer from before shook his head with a helpless look and said impassively, "I advise you not to roast the deer horde beast." Elder Hu frowned. "Why?" Not expecting that a mere 2-star beast tamer would interfere in their affairs, Hall Master Han and the other elders stared at one another as displeasure appeared on their faces. Even the least capable of them was a 4-star primary beast tamer, and it was common consensus that roasting the deer horde beast was the best course of action at the moment. Otherwise, there would be nothing they could do. Yet, a 2-star beast tamer was dared to refute their decision. "Nothing much, I just fear that the situation might evolve beyond your control if you were to roast it." Shaking his head, Zhang Xian decided to say no more. Even though he was a master teacher, he wasn't a Samaritan. There was no need for him to interfere in everything. Besides, the other party seemed to be looking down on him. "It's just the roasting of a deer horde beast. What kind of situation could happen from it? Seeing how the young lad wasn't able to back up his claim, Elder Hu harumphed coldly. Did he really take all of them 4-star beast tamers as fools? If catastrophe could really come from this, they would have long noticed it already before a mere 2-star beast tamer could. Forget it if you aren't willing to listen, Zhang Xian sighed. He had done his part already. Since the other party was reluctant to listen, he wasn't willing to speak any further as well. Humph, seems like you're just a fearmongering, arrogant brat. Elder Hu flung his sleeves. The others also didn't seem too pleased by Zhang Xian's comment. This was especially so for Hall Master Han. If not in consideration that the other party was Hall Master Sai's friend, he would have surely lashed out already. What did a mere 2-star beast tamer know to dare to speak up on their affairs? How boorish! Enough, go and roast the deer horde beast. With a cold expression, Hall Master Han waved his hands. Initially, he still held some considerations over the other party given how Hall Master Sai addressed the other party as his friend. However, from the looks of it now, he was just a rude liar. The situation might evolve beyond control? It was just the roasting of a deer horde beast, what could happen? Other than testing a person's tolerance, what else could possibly happen? Yes. Nodding his head, Elder Hu along with some of elders stacked up some firewood and started roasting the deer horde beast. As beast tamers, they often had to camp in the wilderness for many days to lay in wait for a savage beast. Thus, it was inevitable that they would pick up such basic survival skills. Hoo. Soon, the campfire was lit and the deer horde beast was placed on top. Tzzzzzzzzz. Sizzling sound echoed as a deep aroma began wafting in the area. Roasting the deer horde beast, which had lived by feeding off spirit herbs, further brought out the fragrance hidden in its body. The roasting had just barely begun, but the crowd was already salivating. Let's retreat! Catching a whiff of the fragrance, Zhang Xian shook his head. Retreat? Hall Master Sai and the others were taken aback. We should be at least several hundred meters away, or else we might be implicated as well. Saying so nonchalantly, Zhang Xian took the lead and retreated away from the deer horde beast. As soon as he walked away, Zhao Ye, Zhao Feiwu, and the others hurriedly followed along. Hall Master Sai was put in a position, but after hesitating for a moment, he chose to tag along as well. These fellows! Seeing how the group turned around and left, saying that they might be implicated, bulging veins appeared on Hall Master Han's forehead, and he nearly erupted. Failing to tame that huge fellow had already filled him with rage, and the depressing words of this fellow were threatening to ignite his rage. You are just a 2-star beast tamer. To act as though an unfathomable expert with that deep expression of yours. Why don't you just become an actor? Chapter 496. Bizarre happenings. Truthfully, if it had been any other 2-star beast tamer that said such words, Hall Master Han surely wouldn't have gotten angry. What triggered him was the expression of that fellow who spoke. The other party acted as though he would surely suffer if he didn't heed his words. Not to mention the contempt in his eyes couldn't be any more apparent. To think that a 4-star pinnacle beast tamer like him would be looked in contempt by a young lad. Contempt your head. This demon sink beast possesses the dragon bloodline, resulting in its proud nature. It's normal to be unable to tame it. Do you really think that I wish to go this far? It's precisely because there's no better solution that I'm doing this. Humph. Conceited. It sure is a wonder why Hall Master Sai would become friends with someone like you. Don't bother about them, focus on the roasting instead. The more aromatic it is, the better. Suppressing his rage, Hall Master Han instructed. Yes. Elder Hu and the others nodded, and they increased the intensity of the flame. The aroma of the deer horde beast immediately grew deeper, inducing groans of protest from one's stomach. While that group was about to erupt from rage, Zhang Xian and the others stopped at a distance several hundred meters away. This will do! Zhang Xian waved his hands. Zhang Shi. The crowd turned to look at him with questioning gazes. They had absolute trust in Zhang Shi's capability. Since he had said that something was going to happen, there was a high chance that something would happen. Is Jiang sure worried about a stampede occurring? A thought flashed past Hall Master Sai's mind and he frowned. Given how the aroma of the Dehorde beast is diffusing in the surroundings and considering the irresistible appeal of it to the spirit beasts, it is highly likely that a large group of spirit beasts might be attracted into the area. But, if a stampede is going to occur, won't we still be caught in it at this distance? Under the charge of thousands and thousands of savage beasts, all life forms would be torn to shreds. If a stampede were to really occur, even if they were to escape several dozen kilometers away, they would still be caught within it. Ah, that seems possible. Everyone also came to a realization. What Hall Master Sai said made sense. There was indeed a high probability of a stampede occurring. Such a matter had occurred in Coke's Ridge before, so this wasn't an unfounded worry. Given the aroma from the Dehorde beast, it wouldn't be surprising if spirit beasts were lured in. But if it was such a situation, shouldn't they run away as far as possible? Wouldn't it be courting death if they chose to remain here? A stampede? You sure have wild imaginations. Hearing those words, Jiang Xian was speechless. Since even you all can tell that other spirit beasts could be lured in by the aroma of the Dehorde beast, do you all think that a group of 4-star beast tamers would neglect this possibility? This. The crowd's faces immediately turned red. That was indeed true. Since even outsiders like them could tell that much, how could 4-star beast tamer veterans neglect such a possibility? Since the other party could even foresee the rejection of the Demon Sink beast and prepared countermeasures in advance, they must be prepared for the possibility of a stampede occurring already. Don't worry, such a thing can't possibly happen. Jiang Xian shook his head. Why? Zhao Feiwu was bewildered. Even humans like them found it hard to hold themselves back before the allure of the Dehorde beast. How could spirit beasts possibly resist it? Seeing how the usually astute Gongzi asked such an obvious question, Jiang Xian rolled his eyes. Even though the Dehorde beast is very aromatic, how far do you think the smell can diffuse to? This. Zhao Feiwu was immediately stumped. There was no doubt about the allure of the meat, but at their current distance, the aroma was already barely discernible. If they were to go any further, it would be completely undetectable already. Even though spirit beasts possessed far stronger senses of smell than humans, it would still be impossible for them to discern a smell several kilometers away. Besides, where do you think we are? We are on the territory of the Demon Sink beast. Even if other spirit beasts were to catch a whiff of the aroma, do you think that they would dare to gather here? Jiang Xian continued. Ah. Zhao Feiwu blushed in embarrassment. Powerful spirit beasts and savage beasts demarcated their own territories, and weaker beasts wouldn't dare to step into their boundaries. After all, the moment they stepped past the boundary, there was a high chance they would be killed as a prey. The Demon Sink beast could be considered as the strongest spirit beast throughout the entire Nine Folds Mountain. Given the duration it had lived here, how could there be any nearby beasts who still dared to trespass on its territory? Wasn't that courting death? If I'm not mistaken, in a 10-kilometer radius where the Demon Sink beast lives, there won't be any other spirit beasts. No matter how aromatic the Dehorde beast is, it's impossible for it to cause an uproar among spirit beasts beyond 10 kilometers away. Jiang Xian explained. 10 kilometers? Only then did everyone finally came to a realization. Stopping 2 kilometers away, it was true that they hadn't spotted any spirit beasts along the way. Even though they had noticed a few footprints, they were sparse. Most probably, those belonged to spirit beasts who accidentally wandered into the area and fled hurriedly after smelling the Demon Sink beast's scent. Otherwise, given that they were a large group, it was odd that not a single spirit beast had come forward to pester them. No matter how aromatic the Dehorde beast was, it was impossible for a spirit beast that was 10 kilometers away to smell it. And even if one did, would it dare to walk in here? This was the territory of the strongest spirit beast in the Nine Folds Mountain. It was no wonder why Hall Master Han had no fear. He probably already knew in advance that it was impossible for a stampede to occur. But if it isn't a stampede, what other situation could happen? Eventually, they returned back to the original question. Look on, you'll understand soon enough. Zhang Xian didn't explain the matter. Since Zhang Xian was unwilling to speak, the others didn't think that it was appropriate to question him further. At that point, Hall Master Sai suddenly requested awkwardly, "If there's any danger, I beseech Zhang Shi to save Hall Master Han. The only reason why he snubs you is because he doesn't know of your capability. In truth, he isn't a bad person. No matter what, Hall Master Han was his friend. He couldn't possibly watch on nonchalantly if the other party was in danger. If something really happens, I'll help him. However, I just fear that they might not be happy if I do make a move." Chuckling softly, Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up. "All right, you all should continue watching. It should be about time." Hearing those words, the crowd turned their sights to the front. At this point, the cooking of the devoured beast was about to be finished. The aroma had already reached an unbearable level. These elders were all skilled in outdoor survival skills, and they had brought some seasoning along with them for this operation. Even though it was abrupt, their skills weren't inferior even to the top chefs of Honghai City. Not just the aroma and the taste, even the tone of the meat was perfect. Just the sight of it was enough to induce uncontrolled salivation in one. "Brother Demon Sink, can you smell it? If you become my tame beast, this will be yours. Besides, you only have to stay by my side, so there's nothing for you to lose. Once my lifespan reaches its end, you'll be free once more. What else is there to consider?" Knowing that the aroma had already permeated through the entire formation, Hall Master Han continued, "Hurry up and make your decision, or else we'll be eating the devoured beast by ourselves. By then, it'll be too late. I believe that you should know the value of the devoured beast as well. This is the only one in the entire Nine Folds Mountain, and once you miss it, you'll surely regret it for life." Hall Master Han's words were indeed very persuasive. Any other spirit beast would have already been convinced by now. However, the eyes of the demon sink beast were still tightly shut, and it remained completely motionless. It seemed as though it was asleep. When did the demon sink beast become so docile? At this moment, Xiao Feiwu also realized that something was wrong. According to the legends passed down in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, this fellow was ferocious and savage. Back then, someone had also tried to use a formation to trap it. However, it was a pity that the stamina of the demon sink beast seemed to know no limits. Soon, under its struggling, the spirit stones in the formation ran dry and it broke out of the formation. Formations could be sustained by both spiritual energy in the surroundings and spiritual energy from spirit stones. The former would require a long charging period for the formation to be sustained, whereas the latter only demanded sufficient spirit stones. But regardless which of the two it was, formations required an energy input to sustain it. To cope with the struggling of the prisoner, it would have to expend a greater amount of energy. Once the spirit stones ran dry, even if one didn't know the exact method to break the formation would still crumble by itself. This was precisely the reason why the corridor of the Formation Master Guild had a time limit of 2 hours. If not, as long as the examinee struggled, it would just be a matter of time before the energy in the formation ran dry. Breaking out of the formation under such circumstances wouldn't be a test of one's skill. Despite the ferocious nature of the demon sink beast before, it chose to lie down as though an obedient child. Even though it was interested in the devoured beast before, there wasn't any signs of it wanting to break out of the formation. This was contrary to its nature. "Hall Master, it's done!" Just as everyone was puzzled, Elder Hu and the others were done cooking the devoured beast. The golden spirit beast meat and the deep aroma made it irresistible to all. "Good, bring it over." Hall Master Han nodded. Elder Hu and the others nodded as they brought the cooked devoured beast flesh over. "Do you see that? If you were to hesitate any longer, we'll be digging in." Hall Master Han chuckled as he turned his gaze to the devoured beast. Just as he was about to pick it up to entice the other party, his eyes suddenly widened in astonishment, and he erupted. "What the heck is this? Who in the world ate it?" "Ate it?" Everyone turned their sights over, only to see the previously intact devoured beast missing a limb. Only a trail of bones hung limply on the body. In other words, someone had secretly eaten one of the limbs. Hall Master Han was frenzied. Who in the world was the one who ate the Deerhorde beast? Even though he kept saying that they were going to dig in, it was actually just a method to coax the demon sink beast. If they were to really eat it, the possibility of taming it would drop to zero. In other words, he was just saying it was impossible for him to really do it. Why, in the blink of an eye did a limb suddenly go missing? Not to mention, not the slightest piece of meat was left on the limb. Aren't you all going too far? Don't you all know how much effort I have put into taming this fellow? Hall Master Han glared coldly at Elder Hu and the others. Hall Master Sai and that infuriating 2-star beast tamer had left as soon as the roasting process started, so it was impossible for them to be the culprit. The only plausible suspects were the elders standing before him. Hall Master, we didn't do it! Being glared at by the other party, Elder Hu and the other leaped in shock. They hurriedly shook their hands in denial. They had been swallowing their saliva and suppressing their agitation while roasting it, not daring to nibble the slightest bit of it. They were also baffled by how a limb went missing all of a sudden. You didn't do it? Are you saying that the flesh flew away by itself? Hall Master Han lashed out. What kind of teammates did I find? I asked you all to roast the meat to entice the demon sink beast into submission, and yet you all ended up feasting on it yourself. What is wrong with you all? Hall Master, it really isn't us. I can swear to that. Seeing that the Hall Master didn't believe them, Elder Hu raised his palm to vow to the heavens when he suddenly froze, and his expression slowly warped in shock. Hall Master! What's wrong? Hearing the sudden exclamation, Hall Master Han traced Elder Hu's gaze back to the Deerhorde beast meat, and he nearly spurted a mouthful of blood. The Deerhorde beast, which was initially missing one limb, was missing two now. Staring at the bare bone hanging off its body, an air of eeriness floated in the area. Chapter 497, The Pummeled Hall Master Han. Who was it? Looking around, Hall Master Han raised his hands warily. At that moment, it was clear that it wasn't Elder Hu and the others who'd eaten the Deerhorde beast. But, other than them, who else could it be? Who in the world could eat the Deerhorde beast without his notice? This was way too sinister. Hall Master, look! Elder Hu pointed. Lowering his head, Hall Master Han immediately realized what was going on. Unknowingly, a dense layer of golden worms had crawled onto the Deerhorde beast. They were each around the size of an ant, and wherever they passed by, the meat would vanish, leaving behind only bones. Clearly, the two limbs were cleared away by these insects. These worms were extremely small, and their color resembled the tone of the roasted flesh. Thus, if one didn't pay close attention, it was easy to overlook them. What are those? Hall Master Han was taken aback. Despite being a 4-star beast tamer, he realized that he had never seen those worms before. Hall Master, could these be? Suddenly recalling something, Elder Hu's body froze and fear reflected in his eyes. You're saying that? Seeing the other party's expression, Hall Master Han froze for a moment before fear slowly crept onto his face. Yes. Otherwise, how could any creature consume the flesh of the Deerhorde beast so quickly? Elder Hu swallowed a mouthful of saliva. If it's really that thing, we could really be in trouble. Suddenly recalling something, Hall Master Han lifted his head and looked at the screen, only to see the eyes of the demon sink beast wide opened, gleaming with energy. The edges of its gigantic lips suddenly curled up coldly. Jiangshi, what is that? Upon seeing that bizarre sight, Hall Master Sai couldn't help but ask. As the head of the appraiser hall, his knowledge pool was formidable, but even so, he had never heard of such a bizarre creature. The others also turned their gazes over. Jiangshi had predicted this would happen and brought them over. From the looks of it, this must be what he was worried about. They're soul-devouring ants, Zhang Xian said with a grim expression. Soul-devouring ants? The crowd was bewildered. They had never heard of them before, needless to say, know what they were. However, as soon as Luo Zhu heard that name, his body immediately froze and disbelief surfaced on his face. Legend has it that these ants are the nemesis of soul oracles. They are beings who sustain themselves by consuming souls and spiritual energy. Soul-devouring ants were bizarre creatures who were capable of devouring soul and spiritual energy. As such, they were the nemesis of soul oracles. Why would such insects be found near the cave of the demon sink beast? Instead of replying his words, Zhang Xian turned his head over and asked, "If I'm not mistaken, the soul oracle tomb that you are talking of is located under the lake, am I right?" "You? How did you know?" Luo Zhu was taken aback. He had only said that the soul oracle tomb was in the vicinity. He had never revealed the exact location, so how in the world did the other party know about it? Tombs were all about geomancy, and being buried beneath a lake was commonly known to be inauspicious. No one in the right mind would choose to do so. Thus, if one were to tell another that there was a tomb underwater, one would definitely be mocked by others. Back then, when he looked up the relevant books and found its exact location, he was still in disbelief. This was the reason why he was so confident that no one could have found it. However, the person before him pointed out the matter in an instant. Could it be really related to these soul-devouring ants? Soul-devouring ants live by consuming souls, thus making them the nemesis of soul oracles. However, these things fear water, so the only way to avoid them and not be devoured by them is to be buried underwater, Zhang Xian said. The books that Hall Master Sai gathered on soul oracles might not have had much useful knowledge, but it still provided some basic knowledge for Zhang Xian to work with. Besides, soul-devouring ant was a type of spirit beast recorded in the books of the Beast Tamer Guild. After looking at the ground with his eye of insight, he had already noticed some peculiarities. With some deduction, he swiftly understood the situation. Isn't being buried underwater inauspicious for both the living and the dead? The one who asked the question wasn't Luo Zhu but Zhao Feiwu. Learning that the tomb was beneath the lake had left her astounded. She had spotted the lake as soon as she arrived in the area, and under the ceaseless torrent from the waterfall throughout the years, its current depth was unimaginable. To build one's tomb at the bottom of it, wouldn't one be afraid of one's resting place being washed away by the water, unable to rest in peace even after death? To the soul oracles, they could always possess another physical body to come alive again. Death was nothing more than a temporary sleep to them, and geomancy and the like didn't apply to them. Thus, it didn't matter where they built their tomb, Zhang Xian explained. Oh! The crowd came to a realization. The main reason why tombs were placed at a location viewed to be auspicious was in hopes that they could bring luck to their future offspring. However, soul oracles didn't think that death was permanent to them, and thus, it didn't matter to them where their tomb was located. But that's not right. After a moment of hesitation, Luo Zhu suddenly recalled something and said, "Even though the soul oracle tomb is located beneath the lake, it isn't submerged in water at all. Thus, even if the soul-devouring ants are unable to step into the water, they should be able to enter the tomb by burrowing their way into it." Then why? If the soul oracle tomb were submerged in water, he wouldn't have been able to explore it, and wouldn't have been possessed by a soul within the tomb. That day, when he entered the underground tomb, even though it had been sealed for innumerable years, the air was dry and permitted one to breathe. Since even humans could enter the tomb, soul-devouring ants would surely be able to do the same as well. If that was the case, how could the soul have survived there for so many years? "If I'm not mistaken, you are the one who brought all of these soul-devouring ants over," Zhang Xian said. "Me?" Luo Zhu was taken aback. Even though he had heard of soul-devouring ants, he had never met one in his life before. How could he possibly be the one who brought them over? "The soul oracle tomb is tightly sealed. For innumerable years, it remained secluded from the outside world. However, not only did you open the tomb, you even came out with a soul on you. Naturally, the scent of the souls leaked out. As such, these fellows who specially prey on souls were attracted here. However, due to the limited time of their arrival, they haven't found the entrance yet. If we had delayed for another month, then even if we were to enter, we surely wouldn't be able to find anything at all," Zhang Xian said with a grim expression. Soul-devouring ants were the nemesis of the soul oracles, so naturally, soul oracles learned how to guard against them. They knew how to prevent the scent of their souls from leaking out, and prevent bringing attention upon themselves. However, Luo Zhu didn't. If Shang Xian wasn't mistaken, these soul-devouring ants had probably arrived not too long ago. Otherwise, they would have already burrowed beneath the deep lake instead of loitering around the surface, and wouldn't have been attracted by the aroma of the devoured beast. This. Luo Zhu's face paled. He was actually the one who brought those fearsome things here. Just the thought of it sent shivers down his spine. Recovering from his shock, Luo Zhu suddenly thought of something and asked doubtfully. Even though soul-devouring ants favor consuming soul and the meat of the devoured beast, there shouldn't have needed to escape so far, right? Under normal circumstances, those ants won't harm humans, right? Soul-devouring ants were bizarre and abhorrent creatures, and they were the nemesis of the soul oracles. However, to ordinary humans, they were completely harmless. Was there a need for them to escape several hundred meters away? You're right in that the soul-devouring ants won't do any harm to us. However, you mustn't forget that on top of consuming souls, these insects consume spiritual energy as well, and what a formation primarily drives on is precisely spiritual energy. Zhang Xian explained. Formation? Taken aback, everyone was stunned for a moment before their eyes slowly narrowed. They hurriedly turned their gazes over. Damn it! Seeing the opened eyes of the demon sink beast, Hall Master Han also realized that something was amiss, and his body tensed up. Given that the soul-devouring ant was hidden underground, even though he was a beast tamer, it wasn't too surprising for him to have failed to notice it. However, the demon sink beast was different. Spirit beasts were exceptionally sensitive to their surroundings, not to mention this was its nest. Thus, how could it possibly be unaware of the arrival of these guests? It seemed like it knew that those guests would be attracted by the scent of the devoured beast, and knowing their ability to consume spiritual energy, it was without fear. That was why it chose to close its eyes, lie low, and wait. The moment the spiritual energy of the formation had been completely consumed by those soul-devouring ants, the formation would be like a carriage without a steed. Without a driving force, how could it possibly operate? Upon thinking of all this, Hall Master Han hurriedly instructed. Increase the energy and reinforce the formation. However, before he could finish his words, a furious howl echoed. The trapped demon sink beast suddenly moved, causing the ground to tremor. Voila! The spiritual energy chains locking it, as though having been nibbled on by something, broke apart in an instant. After which, an incomparably powerful aura gushed out from the body of the spirit beast. Both its wings flapped furiously and it flew out of the formation. The formation collapsed entirely, and the mist shielding everyone's view disappeared. Following which, everyone saw the massive body of the demon sink beast charging straight toward Elder Hu and the others. Roar! A furious bellow. Flapping its wings, huge gusts of wind were whipped up. What? Before Elder Hu and the others could react, they were already struck and sent flying. Blood spewed from their mouths in midair. A transcendent mortal 4-Dan pinnacle spirit beast was typically already stronger than human cultivators of the same level. On top of that, it was just captured and forced to submit. All of the resentment accumulated in its heart caused it to go into a rampaging state. How could the elders of the Beast Hall withstand against such might? In just a single move, all of them were already injured. Damn it! Not expecting this fellow to be so callous, disregarding their 3 years of relationship, Hall Master Han's face steeled. Raising his hand, a long spear appeared in his grip. Even though he was a beast tamer, his fighting prowess as an individual was formidable as well. He had already reached Transcendent Mortal 4-Dan Pinnacle as well. As soon as the spear left his hand, it immediately charged forward as though a mighty dragon, headed straight for the demon sink beast. Facing the offense, the demon sink beast didn't even bother to dodge. He simply faced it straight with his physical body. Ding ding! The incomparably sharp spear came into contact with the demon sink beast's chest, but it failed to even pierce through the latter's skin. Needless to say, it was unable to injure the beast. What formidable defense! Zhang Xian, Hall Master sighed, and the others stared at one another with widened eyes. They knew that the spirit beast's dragon bloodline had granted it unparalleled defense among its peers, and ordinary weapons couldn't hope to overcome it. Even so, that was an attack which Hall Master Han had placed his full might into. It was a shocking sight to see that it didn't even leave the slightest mark. It was no wonder why its notoriety would be known throughout the entire Myriad Kingdom alliance, and why the multiple attempts of the royal family in eliminating it ended up in failure. It was indeed a force to reckon with. Roar! After deflecting the spear with its chest, the demon sink beast roared furiously. Its powerful voice enveloped the area with rampaging might reminiscent of a storm. At the forefront, Hall Master Han bore the brunt of the attack. Despite being a transcendent mortal for Dan Pinnacle, he still felt a little faint-headed and nearly spurted a mouthful of blood. Hoo-la! After the roar, the demon sink beast swept its massive wings. A cloud of dust immediately rose into the air, and a massive tear appeared on the ground. Hall Master Han swiftly summoned its spear back to protect himself. Even so, the disparity in the strength of both parties was too great. With a numbing sensation in his arm, he was sent flying as though a ball being kicked into the distance. Pooh! Even in midair, blood kept gushing out of his mouth, causing his face turn ghastly pale. With his internals rattled by the overwhelming force that struck him, Hall Master Han felt as though his body was tearing apart. At this very moment, a thought suddenly emerged in his mind. Did the two-star beast tamer predict that this would happen? You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.